what I was gonna say.
We got power. Well, there we go with that.
There it is.
Mic check,
Testing.
mic check. Yep.
Yep.
Ready? Ready, ready. Apple's ready. That clock's ready. Ready to go? Okay, here we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Village of Vernon Board Meeting. Today is January 5, 2023, 7 p.m., our first meeting of 2023. I'll call the Village Board Meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance and a standing moment of silence.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Roll call and open meeting. Law compliance check.
President Fortner,
Present.
Trustee Klein,
Present.
Trustee Gray,
Present.
Trustee Newman, Present, Trustee Dashick.
Present.
This meeting was noticed and posted according to law.
Thank you. First up, we did have a proclamation for one of our Eagle Scouts on the schedule. He is not here. We tried to reach and couldn't confirm, so we will just postpone that item until Mr. Hughes can be present. So with that, I'll skip, unless there's an objection. No objection. Now we'll go to public comments. Are there any public comments? No public comments. We'll go right to the agenda, miscellaneous matters. First item up is our 2023 road paving program authorizing advertisement for bids. And in your packet, you have, this is familiar list because we saw this at budget time when we set our budget, and an estimate from Foth. And what we're looking to do here, and we'll turn this over to Brad here momentarily, is to look for some kind of direction on Andy to get the bidding and Brad to get the bidding process going, and so which roads, in a sense. So Brad, take it away.
Yeah, the map was in the packet, looking to finish up Hidden Lakes. As you see, Andy's estimate to finish up Hidden Lakes is about $540,000. We budgeted $750 this year for it, so that leaves us, with engineer's estimate, another $200,000. Was talking with DPW staff today, it looks like we probably have 6 or 7 culverts down there that need replacement. Cost in just culvert materials will probably be about $12,000, just there. So, as we look at this, once the bids come in, that's the meat of the project that we want to get done. And talking with Andy, I think we look at having two additional alternates, or 3 alternates here, or 4 with the ones outlined, Lakeview Lane, Hartwig to Dead End, and then Riverview Drive. Those are another $180,000. That puts you at right at that 710 number, if they come in at engineer's estimate. And then there's Hillview Drive, which is another 126, and Prairie Side Drive, which is 32,000. So my recommendation would be is that the board authorize Andy to send these to bid, with the alternates outline, or with the alternates outlined, is Lakeview Lane, Riverview Drive, and then also the other 2, Hillview Drive and Prairie Side Drive. What this does is, depending on price, we can mix and match and get the most bang for our buck of that $750,000. Once we get the bids in, that will put us in a better position to say, okay, let's address these roads. Between now and when the bids come in, staff will be working to come up with additional costs that will come in. We want to have some contingencies for base repair, should that be needed, which usually there is some that comes in. That's done by our staff. Culvert replacement is another additional one, which we've identified on the main portion of the study. We need to look at the other ones, and then also we have striping once that's done, and then depending on the budget too, as we do these road projects, we should look and make sure that all our signage in these project areas is in good standing order. The reflectivity is good and things like that. Provides us a good time to do that. So I think it's going through with staff and identifying that stuff too, which signage does cost a fair amount of money to replace. So that is one thing to take into account. So as we get going, we'll look at that. But tonight we're just looking for the go-ahead to have Andy put these projects out for bid. I think we'd have them come back sometime in at least February for opening, maybe the first, if not the first meeting, maybe the second meeting in February. But we should have the bids back and approved by the end of February, which will put us in a good position to get this work done and get good prices.
Yeah, last year we accepted the bids March 3rd, I double-checked, March 3rd, 2022, so that's a good timetable, for me. So, question, would Andy put them out in a grouping, as described, Andy, this will maybe not be his exact words, but the Hidden Lakes neighborhood with Hartwig Avenue in one grouping, and then alternatively, second, that may be package A, package B would be north of Hidden Lakes, which would be Lakeview Lane and Riverview. Is that how we would do it, or would we'd make them discrete, pluses and minuses? I always thought we tried to group them to get a better, so that the companies didn't think we were going to pick and choose. They were going to, here's your base plus alternative A, which would be north of Hidden Lakes.
Yeah.
Maybe base plus alternative A and alternative B, which would be Hillview Drive, add Hillview Drive, and then C would be add Prairie Side Drive.
Yep, and I can talk to Andy. We can do it that way, or we could do Lakeview and Riverview Drive individually, along with Hillview and Prairie Side individually, and combine them. Once we get the price in, there is. Don't quote me on this. I refer to Andy, but I think you can modify and adjust bids up to 15% of the original thing without any issues. So the question would be is what price if you did that, what price would you follow within the bidding contract for that? So, but I would talk with Andy and see if there'd be if we do 4 alternates, or if it would just be 3 alternates combining Riverview and Lakeview Lane, and then Hillview and Prairie Side do individually. My recommendation would be do individually. I think having them done individually, somebody's going to bid on, they're gonna bid on them that way anyways, knowing that they're gonna get it, so that'll be the thing to look at, so. But I can talk with Andy and see what his recommendation would be in terms of that.
So Brad, the total paving cost that's in the document here is like 885,000 with everything that you've talked about?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's engineers' estimates, so, and I think, this may be, already been told to you guys, but, you know, these are engineers' estimates. Until you bid it out, you don't know what the true cost of the project's gonna be. And then take into account too, this doesn't have, like I said, any of the culvert work, striping, base repair, things like that. I think too, one thing we have to take into consideration depending upon, staffing at the time, looking at, are we potentially gonna need Andy for additional on-site inspection more than what we may have in the past due to, you know, who we hire, for the public works director position at the time, so, that's just one thing to take into consideration. These are fairly simple projects, in general, but, at the same time, we just don't want, just because we don't, we have staff that's learning or something, we don't want that to be an excuse for getting subpar work out of a contractor.
Although Andy's numbers have been traditionally higher
Yeah.
than what we ended up paying for, which has been good.
Yeah.
What happened? Did we ever finalize anything with Big Bend on Big Bend Drive?
Before John Henneberry left, he had not heard anything from Big Bend at that time, and they had not budgeted anything for it. Looking at Big Bend Drive, that I think is the scope of engineering that would be needed on that project, in my mind, is something that would be a conversation that if each community was in wanting to pursue it further, I think the next step would be to look at engineering. You know, I think there's some considerations that need to be taken into effect on certain sections of that. You know, there's the stream crossing that's in Big Bend. That is not a simple replace a culvert type of stream crossing. I know Big Bend has a permit for it. I don't know when that permit expires or not, but there's that. You know, our sections of the road are pretty much pulverized and overlay. Probably some, you know, definitely some base repair, I think, in places. I think the biggest question and I think something to look at is the stretch from ES/National to Quick Trip and up the hill heading north there a little bit. Due to the truck traffic, a question would be would Vernon want to potentially spend a little bit more money there and make that a concrete roadway, to potentially have a road that will hold up longer under the truck traffic there. Looking at the truck traffic that goes in and out of Quick Trip, and also the truck traffic that comes out of DeLuca, and others up there. Asphalt roads deteriorate, or the material will be move over time due to pressures and gravity. And so that's why you may see down there in the turning areas, there's ripples in the road, and that's just from the forces of the tires against the asphalt. So with a concrete road, you're not going to get that. Now, there is a greater expense with a concrete road, but the longevity of a concrete road is much greater. One thing to take into consideration also is that the DOT is going to come through and do some reconstruction, repaving work on the interchange here and on I-43 in 25 and 26. I think we're slated for 26, I believe. So that would be something that the board, if that road could make it that long, would be to piggyback on that or try to bid at the same time as that to maybe get some, you may get the contractor that does that, say, hey, we can, you know, we're in the area, we'll just throw it out, you know, we'll bid on this and get a good bid on it because we're already making money off the state. So I think there's that, but to me, this may be another means to have conversations with the Village of Big Bend through maybe the Shared Services Committee regarding that project and how it wants to go, because I think it's coming up with making sure the specs of the road, everybody's gonna agree upon, who's gonna do the engineering, and then when it comes to bidding, how's it gonna be done? And then financially wise, how is the road gonna be split? I think the actual, if you look at the lane miles of the road, it's like almost a 50-50 split, in cost, because we might actually have more lane miles, which adds to the cost. Big Bend has the bigger expense with the, culverts. So, there's that. So it's just a matter of figuring out, when I talked to Mr. Henneberry, you know, potentially could you do that road in phases too? Do north of Skyline 1 year, do the ES2, Quick Trip kind of portion 1 year, and then that center section, which is mostly Big Bend, that. So I think, you know, more financial wise is the question, for each community to ask is when can they afford it, to do the project, more so than when is it gonna happen. And I think, you know, I think we have funds that allow us to do it, more so than maybe, the Village of Big Bend does. So it's just a matter of financially, what is affordable at this point in time, to both communities.
Did Big Bend pay us for last year's projects that we did with them as a shared service project?
Look, I think they did, but I'd have to look.
Because Big Bend Drive, their avenue, whatever.
Sherry Avenue, right?
Pardon me?
Sherry Avenue is.
Yeah, that was from last year. Right.
Yeah.
And according to Annenberry, the last time we talked about it, everything was okay with Big Bend and the process worked fine. So there shouldn't be any process on how to decide anything, because that was all in the agreement, in the shared service agreement that we started out with.
Yeah.
So then it's just a matter of whether Big Bend had enough money in the kitty to pony up for the project. That's not John's call, that has to come from Big Bend. And it's always been proposed as a shared service project. Doesn't make much sense for us to do it by ourselves, because then it's just gonna be patchwork, because of the way it really comes out.
And more expensive.
And more expensive for both.
us and them.
Right.
Right.
So it's that, Andy did put together some engineer estimates on it, and they range from $500,000 to just a base, just was like a quick pulverize and overlay, to more reconstruction work and things like that. I think that one ranged up to like $1.5 million, $2 million. And I take that back. It's not necessarily a 50-50 split. It's probably more like 60-40 or something like that. I'd have to pull the numbers again and see what they were. But we were not, our cost was less than Big Bend's, but the cost breakdown was because that culvert replacement is a significant cost of the project, for Big Bend, and it all depends on what they do there in terms of culvert replacement. Like I said, it's not just a simple.
Well, that's a concrete culvert that they got it.
Yeah, I don't know what's there. I think it's galvanized now, but there had been talks of concrete there, which is going to be more expensive than going with another galvanized culvert. But the work that needs to be done on that, John shared with me that Big Bend had approached him about doing the work. I think John even provided him a bid at some point. You know, at this point in this stage of the game, I would advise the Village of Vernon from undertaking a project like that with anybody due to the potential risk and the size of that creek. If I recall, bypass pumping would be needed and things like that. To me, that's just until you open that road up, you don't know what's down there with those culverts, and you don't want to run into something that you can't handle at the end of the day, and then be waiting for a crew to come out, or then have to pay emergency crew rates or something like that to whoever would do the work. And so, to me, my feeling would be is that my recommendation to the village would be is that we respectfully decline doing any of that work, just due to the liability and risk involved in a project like that and the permitting that goes involved. It's not like our culverts where dig it out, put a new one in, there's moving water there,
Ditch.
Army Corps of Engineers, DNR.
But the agreement,
versus a ditch, right? Yeah.
but the agreement we have, Big Bend would have to be liable for all of that.
But if we're doing the work,
Yeah, we're saying if
We don't do the
became a
work.
contractor, and he's saying, don't be a contractor, and you're saying, don't be a contractor.
That's right, yeah. We don't do
That's
the
too
work.
big of a,
Right.
that's too big of a job, it seems to me. It's one thing, like you said, to put a culvert in a ditch, and it's another to.
Well, hands down, it's the worst road in the,
Culvert that's doing a stream or a creek,
right. It's the worst road in the village, either village,
either, both villages.
well, both villages.
Right. And we have talked about that, as Jim knows. We've talked to Big Bend Shared Services. We are on the Shared Services Committee. It was scheduled or talked about getting going in 2023, but it is engineering-wise more difficult, as Brad points out, just simply because of the condition of the road and the subsoils. And Andy's estimate, as you said, 500,000, which is not gonna touch the road, to as much as 2 million, depending on what you find, is a big number.
And I think Andy's first recommendation would be to go forward with, actually doing, core samples of the road. Mr. Henneberry shared with me that there is a spot in the road, I think it's in the low spot down by DeLuca in the pond, where there may be big rocks buried in that road as a way to fill it when they made it. Looking at, you guys can probably say the history of this community more than I can, but that is the old wagon trail through, so that road has been there for a long time. And as Mr. Henneberry shared with me, there's spots in that road, I think in the winter, where you can see there must be rocks, and when trucks drive over the pavement, you can see the pavement actually teeter on it. If you've stepped on a retaining wall that's made out of stone and it's not quite supported right, it teeters. He said he'd seen that down there. So, I've had past experiences with coring, hit or miss. Sometimes it can be great, sometimes it can be good. It's all just hitting that right spot and getting it there. And I don't want to discredit it, but at the same time, I'm not one to say let's go gun ho on it to prove something, because until you open that road, you're just not going to know.
I'm fine with not doing it this year. I just don't want it overlooked just because it's with Big Bend. This was a shared service project. The one we did do, the Sherry Abden one, worked out, as far as I know, very well. If Big Bend can't do it this year, well, okay, fine. But we need to keep that on our list and going forward, because it's got to be done. And maybe we have to consider just doing a regrind to get it usable.
Yeah, and we don't want to piecemeal it, but like we said, there are ways to make the road feasible. A majority of our sections feasible, more so than not. It's one of those things with the engineering on that. Once you do the engineering on it, you should be good for several years on the
Right.
engineering. So you can pay that upfront expense, but it's just, it's coming up with the funds for it. And so I think it's a good opportunity to have a conversation with Big Bend again about where they stand on that and where they are financially in a means to do it.
None of this is part of the decision for the motion tonight, right? Okay.
None of that is, although it's a good discussion in the sense of if there's pre-engineering work that we could fit into our 2023 budget, we could, if Big Bend's agreeable, start that pre-engineering work, or, the pre.
This is the same thing that happened with Cherry Avenue.
But it'll be forever to get
We
it done.
wanted to
So I'm
do it-
saying no- I'm saying it's not gonna happen, but go ahead.
Well, it's not going to happen this year.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that. But it's the same thing with Cherry Avenue. The first year we tried to do it, they couldn't come up. We told them, okay, this year we'll bypass it, but it's going to be done next year. So then they did the next year, which was last year. They came up with the money, and that project got done and got done well. I'm tired of seeing stuff just not happen for whatever reason, good reason, bad reason, doesn't matter, and then it just never happens. And I don't think that's right, especially on the roadway that's in that bad a condition. You know, obviously, we're not gonna do it by ourselves, you know, Big Bend has to be in the game, because cost-wise, they got a bigger piece of that pie, a little bit anyhow.
I mean, I think it's a good conversation to have back with the shared services committee. Work off the agreement we had last time and say, okay, when are we gonna start plugging this out? You know, are we gonna know enough by the time there? You know, maybe will we have some money left over in the road budget this year to, you know, have $14,000 left over? Maybe, and that can go towards some work, you know, and that can maybe give us a better estimate on where we're at or what it's gonna take to get this done, and then, you know, that puts us in a good position for next year. But I think that, you know, another question for Andy is what scope of engineering work needs to be done? You know, like I said, on our stuff, if we go baseline cheap, pulverize and overlay, we don't have a ton of engineering, but if we do concrete work or we do, try to do anything more, it's gonna be more expensive. So the, you know, the question becomes, you know, where does that engineering expense go to then at that point? And to what type of time frame if we go with a more complicated road? And I think too, the permitting for Big Bend is, you know, also another question in terms of where they are with their permit and how long is it gonna take to get another permit. You know, I think it's, I can't imagine it's much different than what's going on, you know, with our portion of Center Drive down here by Bartholomew's that's in the floodplain. It's the same, or floodplain, floodway. Once you're in those, you start dealing with FEMA and the DNR, and that becomes a quagmire and a timely issue to deal with.
Sounds like we gotta get a big, and
Well, I think,
just keep plugging at them, I get, you know,
I can understand Big Bend not jumping in with both feet, because we don't have a clue what it's gonna cost us. Or, you know, when I say us, I mean both them and us. So to me, yeah, it makes perfectly good sense that we need to piece this thing out, get the estimates done accurately, and if that means we gotta do water samples, so be it, you know. I'm just disappointed that everybody knew, not necessarily you, Brad, but everybody knew that was on the plan for this year, you know, for next year. I'm disappointed that between the two DPW managers, whatever they're called these days, we didn't get anything done at all. It's just my frustration.
okay, our budget for 2023, I think, is $750,000. We budgeted for 2023.
How many miles does it give us, do you think?
Oh, yeah. Not very many.
Doesn't, I'd have to go back and look at the mileage. It's probably somewhere around mile and a half would be my guess. Probably like 2 lane miles, would be my guess looking at some of those roads. Yeah, maybe a little bit more than that, depending on the scope of what we do.
Just pointing out that if we're not doing 3 miles every year, we're falling behind.
And this might be 3. It's probably closer. I'm probably underestimating I'm probably being conservative in my numbers.
Yeah, I think it's around 3.
Yeah, 'cause
I'm looking at these earlier estimates we
Yeah, it could-
received
yeah, 'cause
during around budget time, and
there's probably about 3 miles worth of road here, if not more.
Hillview Drive, does that include Hillview Drive?
Because Hillview is
Yeah, maybe not.
about a
quite 3.
mile, or Hartwig's about a mile. There's about 3 miles there.
Yeah, I got Hartwig at .66. I got the base bid, I think, at
And
1.86
then it's that point.
miles. The base,
might
which would be,
3 lane miles.
I know we did a little more miles than they've done in the past last year.
right, these miles are both sides, yeah.
They are both sides.
Yeah.
because I figured it's about a half mile long there. And so that would give you a 1 lane road there.
Yeah, so the base, Hidden Lakes neighborhood with Hartwig. Make sure, oh, that's with Hartwig in there. Might be a little over 2. That's our base, it seems to me that's our priority, so we need authorization for the base bid, which is Hidden Lakes neighborhood with Hartwig. I'm just trying to sort it out here out loud. And then the next page up is called North of Hidden Lakes neighborhood, which would include Lakeview Lane, Hartwig to Dead End, and Riverview Drive.
Which are the ones north of there.
Yeah, which is .36. This is a little bit disjointed, which is another, that's another .6, that's .66. And what would you do with that, Brad? You'd work with Andy either to package them up together and advertise those 2 roads,
Yep. Or
separate?
or separate. Whatever the engineer's recommendation would be. My concern, I think what could come in with the bids is you run into the issue that, Prairie Side Court's gonna come in the cheapest because it's the shortest distance, it's a small project. And then Hillview is another, is 126. So with those 2, you could probably get them done and have money available for your engineering, all your other costs. The question becomes with Lakeview and Riverview Drive is you're looking at an engineer estimate
tight.
190,000, which really puts you really tight on. It gives you 30,000 for your budget. You're going to eat up 12 to 15 just in culvert materials potentially, and things like that. So so I think what the board looks at when they do this, they pick. I would package those. I would talk with Andy. I think with Lakeview and Riverview, if you do one, you want to do the other, because it's going to be like, why do we do one and not do the other? But at the same time, you could split those. So I think it's just looking at what your costs are when they come in and saying, okay, what are we going to do and what aren't we going to do? Because let's say it does come in and, they come in at 150 and Prairie Side comes in at 20. Well, maybe you can get Prairie Side in there too and get those done too. And you've hit a lot of miles. So I think if you do them separate, at least then you can maybe separate them. You could do Lakeview 1 year and then come back and do Riverview the next year because it's there. But I would just make the recommendation based upon the engineer's estimates for how to package the alternates.
Right, because I would agree, Brad, because you look at the estimates for the base package, 539, okay? I think we should do that. If you package up north of Hidden Lakes neighborhood, the estimate is 187. Well, those 2 numbers together are 726,000. Our budget's 750. That's not going to leave enough for engineering, gravel, culverts, labor time.
And that's the question that I have to look at too, is
Right.
labor.
And-
How much labor is coming out, how much of our labor is coming out of that budget? Because the public works guys' wages, I think, are budgeted for annual wages out of the DPW, or out of those budgets already, so.
Right.
Which are, if we're putting it into this cost, then you're gonna have money left over in the other one. So that's where I have to just see how it was done in the past. At the end of the day, and see what that cost, how that cost was allocated into the budget.
Yeah, I wouldn't think we'd allocate it into the road, because we have a DPW department 24/7, regardless of what we have them doing.
So,
So it could just be the material costs and the culverts, the gravel, the shouldering, that kind of
and
stuff.
Andy's.
Rental, in Andy's time.
Rental. and you got
Rental, we rent the graveling stuff,
The
machine,
the shouldering machine
Right.
is there, things like that, it comes in not to, this is part of the conversation, but it comes down to a deeper conversation on how we allocate funds in the future is that some communities will go as far as to allocate time, the equipment time there and charge for the equipment time, put that into equipment fund for equipment replacement. Some communities will go as far as that. Now, that's something I think to work into because those costs for those pieces of equipment are, I have to go back and look, but, you know, somewhere between $50 to $100 an hour, so it adds up, but it's another means of looking how to recover those costs. At the end of the day, you're still paying for that equipment anyways, but it's all that, how it gets allocated out, so, you know, to me, you know, we have the other soft costs, base repair, materials, the rental, I think was, I figure about put in 5,000 for the shouldering machine. Rental, I think, is where we were at, you know, 15 in just culverts, so you're at 20, and then, depending how much base you need to put in there, or how much base is needed, that can start adding up if you get a bad spot, but, you know, we should have run into too many bad spots along there, or really bad, where we need a ton of base repair done, so.
Okay.
So, like I said, once you get the bids, you know, we estimate 590 for that Hidden Lakes and North, or, excuse me, 726, but bids might come in at 650.
Right, and then we'll,
Then we can start allocating costs out, well, we can get all that done, and how much more is there, so.
so we'd be looking for a motion to direct staff to advertise for bids for the 2023 road paving program with Hidden Lakes, as presented, Hidden Lakes neighborhood with Hartwig as our base bid package. Based on our village engineer's recommendation, either as an alternative bid package, which would be the base plus north of Hidden Lakes neighborhood, or bid out Lakeview Lane and Riverview Drive separately, based on his recommendation. And then bid out separately Hillville Drive and Prairie Side Drive.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I'll make the motion, since I read it. Discussion, trustee, when you hit your on button, so,
No, I was just
okay,
getting ready to vote.
okay.
I made up my decision a long time ago, so.
Okay, trustee Datchett,
Nothing to add.
and anything?
Mhm.
Yeah, anything more?
No. I'll just say no for now.
Okay. I don't have anything further. Brad, do you have anything further? Make sense? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Proposal for new financial software, and I know we've got in our packet Workhorse, and I think some on our desk, we've got
Civic.
Systems, and we've got, what we put in the budget, 30,000 in the budget.
I think we put more than that, I think we put,
Oh, 40 maybe.
or 55, I think.
Can't remember now.
There's at least 35, if not more.
35 is what I can't remember.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look, but we might even put 55 in there to just be safe,
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
I know there's at least 35.
Yeah.
So why don't you walk us through, I think as far as, tonight, we could maybe reach a motion to approve. And then there's, with Workhorse, for example, there's with, two quotes in there, one's without the fixed asset modular package, and the other is with it. We could, get more information from you, schedule a presentation if you wanted people to come in, or send out RFPs, but Brad, why don't you walk us through where we're at least for now?
Yeah, so like President Fortner said, we can take this as far tonight as approving quotes, or we can, if you guys want to see the software, I can work to have them come in and present this. So the Workhorse package quotes were in your packets. The one that I think was online had it in, not reverse order, but in order after the DPW stuff, but if you look, it outlines each one. I think it gives a good summary of this. As I've said before, Workhorse software specifically was designed and developed for municipalities in the state of Wisconsin. I don't know if they say how many communities they work with. I don't know if it was 400 or something like that. You know, they're marketing to the small, or 280 communities. I think it's probably more than that by now. They're working with communities that are super small, under 1,000 people, to communities that are, you know, our size and maybe even a little bit bigger at the end of the day. Their software, not a dig against them, is designed for that niche size of communities. I think once it gets bigger than that, their software may not, you know, really isn't designed for that. It probably would work, but I always feel that from working with it, this is what it was. So that being said, the software itself and the support for the software is, I've always thought, to be really good. Both the Village of Waukesha and the Village of Big Bend use the software. Our neighbors, Village of Waukesha, has used it for at least 7, 8 years, almost a decade potentially. Big Bend, they're going on year 5, 6 with it. And then, so there's that. And I think some other communities, Bloomfield, I know was looking at the software. I used it in Johnson Creek, used it in Big Bend. You know, nothing bad to say about it. The support was always excellent. Always got a response almost same. If you called in the morning, you got a response same day. Their support staff is former municipal treasurers. So when you're calling them, it's staff talking with staff. It's not a CPA. It's not a you know, accounting person. It's somebody who's been in the situation, seen how the software is used, and understands how to use it, understands what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. Not that the Civic software can do it. So looking at this and looking at the quote, there's 5 modules in the initial quote that I asked for. The municipal accounting, which is the general ledger, municipal payroll, which is the payroll portion of it. There's the payroll portal, which is an app where staff would use that app to complete their time cards, fill in their time cards. I would have to check with them if it provides them with their paycheck stub on there and things like that. But what this does is it allows our staff to fill out those time cards instead of our staff filling out time cards, then giving it to additional staff to enter it into the software. The payroll module of it the payroll app is additional to it. But the payroll module, we'd still have people that'd be entered by staff, but it would be limited to basically board and committee members would be getting paid through it. So we'd have a handful of manual entries in the payroll portion of the software, with the idea that the staff is going to be using the payroll app to do it. The payroll app also creates a set of internal controls where the time cards are then sent to the supervisor, creates a check, and then therefore is sent to the system, and then it is uploaded into the system, and the pay is there. The supervisor and the office staff still have the ability to modify the time cards. If there's an error in a time card or something like that, that can still be modified at that point. So that can be done. So those are the three major, the payroll module and the accounting module are the 2 modules that we really need at the end of the day. The payroll app is something that is additional, but I think would be a good benefit to us in terms of fire department, in terms of, you know, our DPW staff, our office staff, things of that nature. Also eliminates the paper time cards and creates everything to a digital sense, which when it comes to auditing and things like that, it's much easier to retain that stuff. It's much more organized that way. Plus, it's not taking up physical space in our buildings. The other 2 modules that are in the first quote are miscellaneous billing. This would be used when we are billing out for professional services. We would use it when Sherry Avenue project like that, we're billing the Village of Big Bend for something, billing other individuals for things like that, is what we would use it for. And then receipting is another module, and the receipting module is basically just a way to receipt payments that come in, dog licenses, somebody does a application, zoning application permits, our park and rec fees, things like that. What we're using, and the way I envision that too is that we have a computer at the counter. Somebody comes in for a dog license, it's entered into the computer right away. You walk out with a receipt and your dog license. We have it already in the system. Staff then just has to balance the drawer at the end of the day or first thing the next morning. And then you have all you gotta do is do the deposit for the bank and you're good to go. So much more checks and balance. As you see here, the accounting setup and training is $1,200. When I went through the workforce implementation in Big Bend, it was much more user-driven for setup than what it was when I was in Johnson Creek, where Workhorse actually created your chart of accounts for you based upon your input. So we'd send them our chart of accounts that have the account numbers, they would put them in, then we're working with them to verify these are the chart of account numbers. For the first year, we'd have a crossover chart that shows this account is this, and basically our chart of account numbers are where they need to be, so it's not going to be a huge pendulum swing into trying to understand it, because the state of Wisconsin does have a whole manual on how you're supposed to number your accounts. Trustee Dashick can probably allude to that, but it's phone book size, and our chart of accounts are good. When I was in Big Bend, they used QuickBooks, and the QuickBooks just didn't allow for a good numbering like the state wants you to do it. So there was a little bit more to it. And then two, they'll help you with getting beginning balances in there and things like that, along with your training and things like that on how to use the software. And a lot of the training is them showing you, but then also letting you, some of you guys have used software like this and done trainings with it, let you drive the software to learn it more so than, here, this is how you do it now, try to remember it and things like that. So, and it's a lot of, a very friendly software to use in terms of processes, and it's not, things like that. All these modules are interconnected. So it's not okay, I gotta do this here and then go enter stuff here. It's just a matter of posting here and then making sure it comes through here and posting in your general ledger. So as you see, the quote for without asset management is $23,000. Annual support is $34,500. We will always be paying this annual support every year, just like with any software. But this fee is, I think really reasonable. And then you have the annual pricing for the payroll portal.
Did I mishear you? What was the cost for the annual support?
$3,450.
I thought you said 1,000.
Yeah, it's $3,400.
Okay.
Total for all the.
All right, that's fine.
modules listed. It was $1,200 for training and setup.
Yeah,
And so, and that includes all your updates, things like that. So they don't charge you don't have to go buy the next version for an update. They're always updating, things like that. And then you have the payroll support, depending on how many time cards you have. That's what you're gonna pay. I think, looking at what we had, we're kinda in, either $850 to $1,200, but, we have two people doing it. It's probably 6 hours a time, times 26, start figuring it out. It's, what is that, 100, so it kind of pays for itself. Plus, I think the checks and balance it creates for the auditor is where we want to get at the end of the day. So looking at that second one, the other one that I had, I'm just price in there for us, is fixed assets. I have to talk to the auditor if this is beneficial to us or not. In governmental accounting, there's really not a ton of stuff with depreciation at times, except for when they do the audit. And so there's that, and really you don't see that until you get to utilities is really the big area where you start to see depreciation involved. So to me, the question would be with the auditor, is this $3,100 expense right now worth it, or is that something that you guys are doing as part of the audit for depreciation of fixed assets in terms of the audit there, and what's that cost for it. So that would just be a question for them. You know, even with that price, we're still at 2,600, 27,000. And then, it does take the annual support up to $4,050. So a little bit more there. As I put on the table, as you see with Civic, basically had them put together the same stuff. Civic does have licenses where Workhorse does not. So with Workhorse, I could have 5 people using it. Everybody in the office could have it open using it. There's not going to be any issues. Civic, you can only have so many people, 4 users using it at one time. So as you see here, general ledger, accounts payable, and payroll were quoted in the overall quote. Cost of that's $29,000, almost $30,000. Or excuse me, year one total with that is $29,000. $5,700 conversion fee, and then training, $7,200. My sense of Civic is kind of the Cadillac version of Workhorse. It's going to have more bells and whistles on it. It's going to be something that this community would kind of grow into over time. But I think with both these products, we're looking at products that are going to be we're looking at products that are going to get us 10 years, 15 years, 20 years at a clip. And I think both these products have the capability of doing that. I don't have concerns that in 15 to 20 years, these products are not going to no longer be sufficient or going to be an issue. Where some of you guys can maybe test this, you had financial software that was DAWS based or pre-DAWS or whatever it was, and people have grown out of it. This Workhorse has aged very well in the time that I've used it. It's not decreased in its ability, it's only continued to grow. I haven't used Civic in a couple of years, so I can't speak to it, but I think with who it's backed by and things like that, that it's in the same position there. So as you look at it, the setup and everything is there. The initial cost is about a couple $1,000s more, and the annual fees are about $1,000 or $1,200 more. But if we're comparing apples to apples with this, you had cash receipting, which I think is something to look at. That's another $3,500 plus the support, and then to me, the payroll add-ons, My Time and My Pay, basically are the same things that the Workhorse portal app is, where the employees are filling out their time cards themselves and then submitting it, and then there's the checks and balances. That's $4,000. So to me, the Workhorse or the Civic quote is another $75.
Excuse me.
Plus annual support of 1,000 and cash receipting another $850. So you're almost $6,000 a year in support. Where Workhorse you're at 4,000. So there's a $2,000 savings. And to me, those are the big ones. If you look at fixed assets, there's another one. If you see on here, the MyView workflow is a AP workflow that allows you to scan in your invoices, send it to the department heads for approval. On the computer, on the app, they fill out the invoice in terms of putting the account number, attaching a memo to it, and signing off on it. It creates a digital. It allows the invoice now becomes digital. So if you ever have to go back and search for an invoice, you're starting to create data to just go look that way. Doesn't mean it doesn't mean you're getting rid of the retention of the invoice on paper outside of your retention schedule. But once you get rid of that invoice paper copy after the retention schedule, you still have that data that is available should anybody ever need to go back to it. So it's there, but at $3,000, is it necessarily needed? To have that data, or, you know, the several times you're gonna need it, is it there? So, you know, to me, the total all-in cost for Civic, you know, you're looking at, you know, a cost of almost $40,000, initial setup fee, and then $2,000 more a year in support. Just, I can't, while it's a good product, I can't recommend it for the community at this point, just due to the cost, but I think Workhorse can do it the same. The user friendliness of it are about the same. Workhorse is probably a little bit more user friendly, and probably a little bit easier to catch on. But you know, I can't justify the added expense to the village just to have extra bells and whistles. I'm not one to say we need a Cadillac, but I'd rather take the Chevy over the Cadillac and use the money elsewhere at this point. So, I think the question for you guys is that, do you want to make a decision tonight? Do you want to see if we can have a presentation, or how would you like to move forward, I guess?
From my standpoint, none of us are going to use any of this software. So I don't even know that a presentation really does us any good. I know Workhorse is fairly common, at least in this area. My biggest concern is just the training, you know, making sure we get our people trained right away on it. The other questions I had on it was, did you tell them what system we have now so that they kind of know what they're going to be up against for data conversion?
Yeah, and so I think, whatever system we would go with, my hope would be, and I know Workhorse can do this, is we would look for a July 1 start date. So we'd split the year in half. The data conversion of it, I think at a base level, what we need is, we definitely need beginning balances of July 1 to put in there. I think the time and the effort to convert all of this year's data over to Workhorse is probably something that's time and money effort's not worth it, and that we may have to recall stuff from the current software to look up stuff for the first half of the year, and then the second half of the year you have Workhorse, and do that type of conversion, and then 24. And as you move on, you're going to continue to have more and more data and rely less upon the old data that's there. The software just needs good beginning balances at the end of the day, is what they need. In terms of other additional data that would probably be beneficial to carry over, when I did the conversion in Big Bend, we did a January 1 conversion. All we did is put beginning balances in there, and that was it. I think the bigger question becomes with payroll. These software, as it says, it will produce the W-2s and things like that for you. The 23 W-2s may not be able to be produced strictly out of Workhorse just due to the conversion, but what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for 24 to do that. And Workhorse can work with you to get those W-2s to be not correct, but get it so that the data is there. I think with ACS and how that system is, if they can get it converted into Excel, then that data can be transferred over a lot easier into these systems. So I don't think it's a big worry to them. They've worked with, you know, a wide variety of systems. Like I said, when I was in Johnson Creek, they were still on DOS-based software, and we converted over to Workhorse, and didn't seem like it was the biggest challenge. It was more challenging than maybe a normal conversion for them because of the DOS-based issues, but beyond that, you know, they're working with multiple different conversions at a time, so they see it all the time. I think they're doing 5 or 6 conversion. They were doing 5 or 6 January 1 startups.
What about the hardware?
Hardware is just probably server space, no additional.
Because I doubt that we have room for 2 systems.
So, yeah, so what the systems are, you're just adding more data. The systems don't take up, I'd have to talk to, I did ask Ron about this, and he didn't think it was gonna be an issue. It's just, you're putting more data onto the server as you create the data, so as we go along, that will be one thing. But in terms of, are we going to crash our server or something over this? No, the software is pretty simple. It's not over the moon where we gotta get a whole new server or something like that.
Is it Windows 10 based or?
Yeah, it's Windows based, so I've never had any issues with compatibility of computers or anything like that, so, we should be good to go on that.
Yeah.
Reading between the lines, your recommendation would be Workhorse.
I agree with Brad then.
Well, Brad, thank you for that presentation. You touched on many of the questions that I had in my mind. One, what about accounts payable purchase order system?
That,
Is that part of the municipal accounting package, or is that something, a module that we have to buy separately, or how does that work?
So accounts payable is within each of those quotes.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
somewhere.
so there's an accounts payable. I don't believe either one necessarily has a purchase order process to it in terms of getting prior approvals for purchase orders. Which, and I'd have to go back and look. I don't think, they don't have a system for, Civic might have a system for it in theirs, in that the, My AP workflow, there might be something, and Workhorse may have a box or an information data point in, when you're entering AP for purchase orders. I could reach out and ask somebody. But I think as we move, as we start setting limits, if we're gonna talk about policies on purchasing and what those limits are and what authority people have to purchase and what those thresholds are, if you start looking at what purchases really are and what, let's say you set at $2,500, if you start looking at $2,500 purchases that the village makes at one time on even a single item, there's only maybe 50 in a year. There's not a ton of it. And as you start to increase that number, it's not there for it. So, once you start talking about repairs and bigger things like that are, you got a bunch of parts there or things like that, it's there. Fire department, usually their big purchases are turnout gear or tools and equipment where that stuff's bigger. But that's where, the purchase order thing is more of getting permission before you make the purchase through the correct channels. And that's where, the reliability of the department heads comes in. Once you put a policy in place that you need to have approval of this prior to making the purchase and making them aware of that, which I think can be done based upon making sure they get quotes and setting up a policy for it, a procedure for it, more so than relying upon a software to do it. Because if somebody's going to circumnavigate the policy or the procedure, they're going to do it anyways, whether you have the software or not. And the software is not going to prevent somebody from ignoring the policy or procedure if that's what they would choose to do.
depends on the software. I guarantee that. Yeah, because purchase order was one of the ones, because that is something in my mind that we should be looking at. Whether we do it with, software or what you're referring to as just a policy. It's totally ass backwards to be doing it the way we're doing it, where we're approving invoices where we already have the product and now the board finally approves the purchase of it. That's just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and that's where, like I said, I think a procedure comes more in place. It comes down more to budget, budgeting at the end of the day, because you know, I think you look at big purchases. Let's say one of the trucks breaks down. You know, it's easily, you send one of our big trucks to get work done somewhere else. It's easy to, you know, let's say you set the limit at $2,500. To me, that's something that, you know, if you know you're getting more than $2,500 work, it's hard to wait or call, you know, what's the point of calling a special meeting to get that truck fixed when you know you need to get it fixed? To me, the purchase order comes in place when somebody knows they're going to be making a bigger purchase. And that's where I think some of that stuff needs to be outlined in the budget. Necessarily, is it set in stone that, hey, we're purchasing this over $2,500? And can it be flexible and be a living, breathing document? I believe so. But at the same time, you know, you don't want somebody in the budget allocating $5,000 for gravel, but they go out and buy a $5,000 specialty tool. You know, like DPW, or things like that, and that's where the purchase order and the policy is to prevent something like that, to put checks and balances in place before something like that would be ordered.
We have that kind of a policy now. And it happens. People overspend certain line items and just charge it to a different line item. Well, that ain't right.
And then that comes down to staff making sure. Well, the way we approve the budget is we approve it in generality by area, not by necessarily department. And so state law would say that unless that area is overspent in the generality of how the budget was approved, like for us, we use the budget summary. And unless somebody's overspent on that line in the budget summary, there's, the village is not obligated to do a budget amendment or approve further spending in that until that limit's been exceeded. Now, ways to have more control over it through the use of state statutes and what's outlined in ordinance and statutes is to start approving the budget on a more detailed level. Now, does the board necessarily want to sit here and have to do a budget amendment for every single line item or have to look at every single line? A board can and has the authority to do so, but is it the best use of time? Probably not. But if if a department's having an issue or an organization's having an issue with spending, then that is maybe an extreme use or extreme way to help reduce spending or have oversight on spending and prevent overspending before it would happen, or, you know, at least by line item. So it'd be there. So, but it's finding that happy medium ground on it, because once a line's been, you know, if you prove by line, once a line's been overspent, technically, I believe by state statute, the board needs to do a budget amendment to authorize further
Right.
spending on that line, and we don't approve the budget that way. But, you know, I think big picture wise and department wise, we don't want departments overspending by general area, but overspending by line should not be done because that line's been, because there's other money in other areas per se. Like going back to the example of repairs, if we get hit with a bunch of repairs, your repair line item for DPW may go over, but now that department should be conscious of saying, that doesn't give me an excuse to spend all, you know, I should try to find other ways to save money in my budget so that in total my department doesn't try to go over. Now the department head has, I forget the term that's used in private business to explain the variance of why the line is over, is because of repairs that you couldn't
Anticipate, right.
anticipate. You shouldn't have repairs. Your major repairs shouldn't be anticipated if you're doing proper maintenance on your trucks. I mean,
Right.
some, you know, maybe at X mileage you have to do this to the truck, but you know, if you're seeing a plethora of repairs because of poor preventive maintenance, which we don't see in our organization, you're eliminating that. But getting back to the point of, if you're over on repairs, you should try to look somewhere else in your budget and say, okay, can I save some money here? Can I save some money here? So that departmental wise, I'm not overspending at the end of the day. And that comes down to the responsibility of the department head and staff to make sure that's not happening. And, my position on spending is that just because just because you have repairs come in and now your line's to be overspent, you should be showing that in your repairs that you're spending money on over repairs and have it overspent, and not spreading that repair cost out on other accounts, to do that, because it's not accurately reflecting how the money's being spent, at the end of the day. So, whether that was past practice or not, I haven't delved deep into seeing if that was, but to me, future practices is, if it's a repair to one of our DPW trucks, it's gonna go on repairs in DPW, the repair line item, it's not gonna go into miscellaneous and, what other line items are there. But department heads need to be responsible for what they're spending and live within the budget that they have. And if they can't live within the budget they have, then they need to, during budget season, explain either why they need more or evaluate and accurately budget for what they're going to be spending by line item, and things like that.
I think part of the frustrating part of all of this is, and maybe it goes back to how the accounting system not only the software works, but the people putting the data in to try to keep track of where we are to budget is nearly impossible, because we're approving invoices 30, 60 days later. So we never know exactly where we stand on June 30.
So we look at the line items in the current budget, and it's not right, because they've already spent more money than,
And that's a frustration that a lot of boards have at the end of the day, is how do we know that our numbers are accurate? And, we have, our debt payments are in, March and September. So when we have our debt, and I have to look, I think we pay our principal in March. When you go and look at your spending, when you're spending $250,000 on debt each year, you're paying 75% of that in March. As you go through the year, that line's gonna look like it's overspent, but you have to, in your mind, say, okay, well, I know I'm not gonna have any further expense in this until X month to fill this up, and vice versa. And that's where I don't say the reliance on department heads comes in, but that's where accurate reconciliation and timely reconciliation comes into effect, so that and our meeting schedule's maybe not quite conducive to it so much, because let's say we meet on the 1st and then we meet again on the 14th. Reconciliations should be done by the middle of the month, or the goal should be, you should be striving to get a goal where they're done by the middle of the month. And we don't have a ton of, our reconciliations are complicated because we don't have a ton of funds, we don't have utilities, we don't have things like that. But if you're meeting on the 21st of the month, you're hopefully seeing reconciliations for the end of the month prior. And so that's where it's there. But if you're meeting on the 15th of the month or the 14th of the month, it may get a little difficult to see those numbers due to the reconciliation process, where it becomes, now you are into the next month and it's 30 days old, or 45 days, not 45 days, but 30 to 40 days old. So yeah, there is that lag, but it comes down to a process of staff being held accountable and explaining, hey, we know this line is high in, we've spent 75-80% of this line by June. Explaining, not necessarily putting written explanations as to why this line is over, but being able to explain why this line's at 80%. Are you gonna go over this line by the end of the year, or is, most of your expense here now?
But without a purchase order system, you don't know what's already committed. So not only what you spent, but what have you also committed, which we're going to end up getting invoices for.
Yeah, and that's where department heads then need to be timely also, is in, as soon as an invoice comes in, here's what it is. And that's where the department head, you know, maybe I have some disconnect on what you guys are saying on purchase order, but most communities that small communities I've been with, nobody is sending in a purchase order to purchase something prior to making that purchase. But what it comes down to is the department head in an organization of this size should know what's still outstanding and know what they need to purchase. And if they're purchasing beyond what is in their budget, that falls on them for not, one, knowing what their budget is, two, knowing where they're at, and two, knowing where they're at comes down to the office staff providing accurate information to the department head on a timely basis on where they're at. And if that, I'm not saying that's the issue or has been the issue, but it's there's two factors there, but both factors have to be accountable, and an excuse of not having the data is not an excuse for overspending.
I would agree with that. And your premise that you stated, I would also agree with, except it can never work, ever, accurately, because even the supervisor, he looks at his budget screen, on the system, and it doesn't show that he's already spent $1 bazillion of it. So as far as he's concerned, everything looks okay. He said, "Oh yeah, this is for 18,000. I got 25,000 there yet," and off it goes. 3 months later, when that bill comes in, he's already over budget.
And that's where I think a lot of the product that we buy is order today and get it in a timely fashion. Now, there is granted, there are products that we do order that are a longer lag time. But
Trucks.
Trucks,
Big lag.
turnout gear, maybe some fire department tools. But, for us, that lag time is there. I think we're in an organization this size to say, hey, this is what, at least I can speak for myself. If I'm budgeting, picking a line, office supplies or things like that, I'm keeping track of what, I have a general idea most of the time of where we're at, or I can go look and say, okay, I know I've spent this. What else is out there that we've ordered that may add up to this? And before I'm placing that next order, I'm sitting there and looking at it and saying, where is this gonna go? I'm not ordering and then saying, where is this gonna go? And so our department heads need to be performing at the first example, not at the second example, for it. And if they're performing at the second example, then there needs to be a cultural shift with them to say, this is what it is. And, getting back to the size of the organization, in DPW, our guys aren't going out and buying stuff usually they're not going out making expenses that are, expenditures that are large expenditures. They're going maybe to the hardware store to get this, they're going to the hardware store to get that. That's where, the department head is watching their budget and saying, hey guys, we gotta slow down at the hardware store, we gotta slow down at Menards, or we gotta slow down at this, or that, it's things like that. Or, hey, we're at this cost for parts, we gotta, the preventive maintenance gotta wait till January 1 before we, go buy these parts for the mowers for next year, because we're not gonna use the mowers in November or December. But that comes down to department heads limiting who is spending. And when you have not a single the fire department, when you have a department of 30 people, you need to limit who is going and spending and making expenses to certain individuals, so that you can, when you say we're done spending on this, or we're really close on this type of spending, we're not spending anymore, that the buck's gonna stop there. But if you don't have that control of your staff, then the department head needs to come up with a means to clamp down on that spending.
I'll give you a couple examples in accounts payable. There's several invoices. It seems like I always have this feeling that our fire department goes and spends a lot of money in the last quarter of the year. We're approving invoices today dated in September. Okay? We're paying those invoices today. That means that how does the department head even know that he's got budget left?
And that,
That's why, like a purchase order system, you know what's ordered, we know what's committed. Because by the time the invoice comes in, we're not even entering that invoice in September, we're entering it in December.
and that's where, to me, and that is for what invoice?
These are for the Eagle printing or
Oh,
Eagle
Eagle
engraving or something.
And that,
But there's, most of these invoices, they're dated in November, they're dated in
and that comes down,
September, they're
that
dated.
comes down to our department heads bringing these over in a timely fashion, but also under,
Correct, okay, so if we had a purchase order system, I know that stuff, I know that those invoices are expected. Because they've committed the funds in that budget line.
Now, maybe,
That's where we're really failing here, because when the finance committee sits down with the budget, and we look at those line items, it's like, oh, we've got 85% of that line left to spend. And 2 months later, we're over, because all the invoices caught up.
and maybe a purchase order system isn't the answer, okay? But that is the problem. And, I'm not knocking the supervisors or department heads, because they have really no way of knowing unless they got their own little spreadsheet going on the side, which I doubt is happening, but it's possible. I just don't think so, because we wouldn't be seeing this stuff the way it is. The other thing we don't have an approved vendor list. People go out and buy whatever I shouldn't say whatever they want, but from whomever they want. I don't ever see requests for quotes or RFPs from anybody else except for what's driven here at this table.
and that comes down more to the policy on what the organization wants to see in terms of quotes and setting the level. If it worked at past organizations, when I was at Johnson Creek, they had it where if it was over $2,500, you had to have multiple quotes. If it was, and you could, as long as you had multiple quotes, you could make the purchase. If it was over $5,000, you had to get multiple quotes, and you had to have approval from the administrator prior to making the purchase. And I think if it was over $7,500, the village board had to see multiple quotes and approve the quotes prior to making the purchase. Like I said, you start looking at those transaction levels, the amount of transactions that are over, each one of those thresholds. I'd probably say most of our at least 50% of our transactions are less than $2,500.
But we might be doing them 10 or 15 times a year.
Yeah, and so that's where I'm getting at, is where it is. But like I said, the same thing comes down to the department head should know and should have a general idea of, hey, I've approved this, I'm cognizant of it, and things of that nature. Whether somebody else, whether I would tell our office staff, go order office supplies, here's what we're ordering, you go order this. I should know before that order is placed if I'm gonna have the money for it, or if there's going to be funds available for it. I shouldn't be buying and then looking to see if there's funds. You should have a good understanding what's there. And if you don't, then to me, the practice is you should be reaching out to the office to find out where you are in that line item.
Okay, so that's what we're talking about, is the accounting system.
Yeah.
Okay, we can't rely on the accounting system. So we're asking, does Workhorse have a module, an accounts payable module, or a purchasing system module that's gonna benefit us? So that our invoices, our commitments, our invoices are timely.
Yeah, we don't have, our purchasing invoice, like a purchase order system, knowing what's outstanding that we haven't received yet. There's not, and I have not worked with a system
Okay.
that has that.
Well, my accounting system that I use, we start with the purchase order, we match it up with the invoice. It's
Standard
all in the-
business.
It's all in the system. Also, I'm gonna use another example. I sell to West Bend School District. You know, the mechanic calls me, he says, hey, I need this part. He called me today. He says, can you send me a quote? Let's say it's $126. He says, I will have a purchase order number for you by the end of the day. Okay? So he's, West Bend School District, they use a purchase order system. He has to tell them what he's buying, and it's in the system before he even orders it.
And what I'll say is that school districts, while it's a good example, school districts are much larger, and the West Bend School District is,
I'm just using it
Yeah,
as an
yeah,
example. So
yeah,
that's what I
I
would
mean-
like to see here in the village.
it's, to get a purchasing order software, we'd probably have to look at a different vendor than what's there. You know, the, to me, it all comes back to the policy and the procedure that would be established is to say, set a threshold. If it's $1,000 or if it's $2,500 or it's $5,000, it's there. But whether to set up a purchasing order system, I understand where you guys are trying to go. I think the staff time to put into it is probably not worth the results. But I think what is more worth the results is that department heads need to be held accountable for their actions. You know, I believe that a department head should,
It can't be given our current accounting system. They can't
They-
understand where they are.
Well, we can't.
but
And we can't.
But I could go on here. I think I go onto the accounting software, and I think if somebody, I could go on there because I went on there last week to see how much money we had left in repair budgets for this year. Whether there's still money outstanding that needs to come in or not is the question, and I couldn't answer that question because I hadn't worked with, being new, I couldn't do it. But I could tell you if I'd been here for 3 months, and not use Public Works as an example, but if I was the Public Works Director for 3 months, I could tell you, I have a pretty good idea what's coming in and what expenses are coming in that are larger with the repair budget. So I went and looked at the repair budget. The repair budget in the DPW was pretty much used up. There was about $1,500 left in the park budget. I could have said, well, we need to order some parts for the mowers. Let's order them and use up this year's money. What we needed to order was more than what we had, plus didn't know what was coming in, so let's not go over. As a department head, our department heads are in that position because they're good at what they do. And I think to be in that position, the expectation of them understanding what they've spent and what they still need to spend, they should know that. And if they don't, then they should have a system or be able to make educated and reasonable decisions prior to making purchases that may cause them to go over budget. Because they can call here at any time and I could at least say, this is what you spent, but then they should be able to say, well, I know I have this outstanding, I know I have this outstanding, to get them in a ballpark of where they're gonna be budget-wise. Now, whether they know to the exact dollar where they are is the question, but they should be able to say, well, I know this is coming, I know I have this expense. Can I spend?
I understand. Bottom line is, we don't have any chance in hell of knowing what's going on. And yet, we end up having to approve. Doesn't make any sense.
That's where then the data needs to be given to you guys to do that, to make those decisions. But I don't want to throw this back on you guys. If somebody's going over, then either myself, because most likely those department heads will be reporting to me, need to be, discipline's not the right word, but then there needs to be a change of how they're doing things so that's not occurring with that ability. And frankly, that's part of their job, is to budget effectively. Going over consistently in budgets is not an effective way of budgeting, and is not an effective way to manage your budget, and going over is not an excuse. There's not sufficient excuses to go over, except for unforeseeable reasons.
Okay, just to get things moving along here. I agree 100% what you just said. It's just that this board's responsibility is, one of the main things besides safety is the fiscal responsibility. Making sure we're spending the money on the right stuff. We've expressed for the last half hour what our problem is. I don't care how you solve it, okay? But welcome, good sir. Figure out how to solve it. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's a purchasing system or, we've had policies and forever of different natures. We've had the same problems. I've been on this board, town boards, chair, whatever, trustee, for, and it's always been that way because of the systems we're using. Well, I've been always blaming the system, but that may not be 100%.
To me, the department heads need to be held accountable.
Right.
Part of our job as bureaucrats is to, I believe, live within the budget that we set. Now, and set, we recommend, and the board sets, or the governing body sets. Whether the issue becomes if budgets aren't sufficient, but that is not a reasonable excuse to me in this organization, because I believe every department has a sufficient budget to operate at this time, and going over budget consistently either means, one, we're not budgeting where we need to be, or we're not budgeting consistently and reasonably to what we're spending. And if we're not doing that, then the department head needs to then make sure recommendations are made to emphasize why we're going over budget and why we need to budget this amount to fix that issue. And if there's not funds to do it, then it's there. But then we, as a department head, you need to look at ways to save other money that doesn't impact the service, so that you're not going over budget and living within the means that are set to you. And if you're not meeting those means, then the conversation comes down to the performance of the department head's job. Just like, right now, at the end of the day, the buck stops with me for most of it in terms of what it is. And while the administrator has the authority to discipline some department heads and may not have the authority to discipline others, that doesn't mean department heads are not immune to being disciplined for not meeting expectations.
Okay, so getting back to the software,
Neither of these.
does Workhorse, okay, you're gonna get an invoice in, you're gonna enter in that invoice, but where? What module?
You enter in accounts payable.
There is no accounts payable module here
On work, should have been.
on Workhorse. You've got municipal accounting, municipal payroll, miscellaneous
It's part
billings,
of,
and
it's
receipts.
part of the municipal accounting.
It is.
Yeah,
That's the point we're trying to get to.
yeah, yeah. It's
So
in-
that we have an accounts
in-
payable
yeah.
list and not a check payable.
Well, and you're always gonna
Check
have a
payments.
payables list. I mean, that,
We don't currently. Okay, but it's not necessarily the software, it's how they chose to enter things. And what I want to make sure is that we're entering things properly into an accounts payable, we're entering that invoice, and that's what's being approved. So that in
You're
December,
asking
the
to.
September invoice will be entered in September. I don't care when we pay it. but it's gonna be in our data and in our records in September.
So, you're looking to approve the payment prior to actually,
I think we need to be approving payments prior to checks being cut. I don't necessarily
which we do.
care about when we're cutting the check.
And the way we do it is traditional with any community that I've ever worked for, and what I can say is this community, and it's no knock on the community, this community is much stricter on the accounts payable process and more thorough in the accounts payable process than any community that I've ever worked in. In there, in terms of, in terms of, in other communities, staff has had a lot more freedom to do check runs as, I don't say as needed is maybe not the right term, but not do the check runs and then get approval for the payments after the fact and the checks that may have already been sent out. Now, with that being said, that goes back to the conversation we just had, and not to rehash it with everybody, but it comes down to a trust issue between the board and staff, that the board is adhering to the budget and not overspending. So there is that, and to get to a process to approve payments before we get, before we place an order is not necessarily traditional with any organization, because the way I've always seen it is that the communities are always paying the bills after the check has been cut. Now, we don't send out the check until you guys have approved it, but we do, that is traditionally how it's been done in any community I've worked in any community that I've been part of is how it is. So, that's the difficult thing to do.
I got just one quick question, then we have to move on, I think. How does our department head know what it's gonna cost before he orders it?
So that gets, I think with,
Because there's no guarantee that they're getting quotes. I haven't,
that comes back to the policy or procedure you establish in terms of what level are you gonna require somebody to get quotes. But, you know,
I mean, if they don't know the cost before they order it,
they should
Yeah.
know that, you know, if I'm budgeting for something, you're gonna have a general idea of what the cost is. You know, I don't think we're in a position to budget, we're gonna buy 10 pencils this year and 20 pens and blah, 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 blah. But we should have a general idea of what, you know, an office supply budget, it may not be the best example, but you should say, well, if I know I gotta buy X amount of paper for the year, I know that I need to, you know, if I'm gonna buy 10 cases of paper at $20, it's gonna cost me $200 of paper for the year. If the paper price goes up by $5 a box, now I need an additional 50 in there. Where am I gonna pull that from? And they should be cognizant of what that cost is. Not necessarily they're gonna know the cost of every single thing they order prior to ordering it or prior to reaching out to somebody, no, but they should have at least a general idea of it. But to, you know, on the policy can set the threshold of, hey, what quotes did you get? You know, if you guys wanna set it super low and you have to get multiple quotes, that's fine, but then, you know, efficiencies come into play in terms of, you know, that's where you usually see it at a higher level. But you know, like I said, when I was in Johnson Creek, anything over $2,500 you had to have multiple quotes for. Or at least try to get 3 quotes. Anything over $5,000 you had to have multiple quotes, plus you had to get village administrator approval prior to making the purchase. And $7,500 was anything over $75, multiple quotes, and village board approval. So the thing is there, but now as a department head, not to circumnavigate the question, but if your limit is $2,500 before you have to get village administrator approval or whatever, do I go and order the $2,400 item now, and then I go back and order another $2,400 item and circumnavigate the issue? It doesn't change what your expense is at the end of the day. And that's where the department head has to be cognizant of, because the excuse is, well, I kept it under $2,500, I made the purchase, and I went over. That's on the department head, and that's where it comes back to being held accountable for not living within the expectations that are set for the department heads. And blaming your staff members for going over budget is not a reasonable expectation in my mind either for this organization. Not that anybody's done that, but it comes down to me at the end of the day, our department should be cognizant of what's being spent and what upcoming expenses are coming.
I think part of this, part of it is that the timing, let me see if I can articulate this. If we're not going to have a true purchase order system, whereas purchase orders as they're issued, number so-and-so is for this, and here's the dollar amount, here's the account it's going to get charged to, and we're going to instead wait for the invoice, well then, a September invoice, if it's paid in January, it should be already in the system in September.
Yep.
Not January. And so maybe, but that is not a software issue,
Right?
that is
That is
a staff issue. That is, get your invoices over here and get them into the system. Then it becomes a payable.
Yep.
And, the monthly cleaning bill, okay, just looking at this, okay, well, that's a monthly cleaning bill. I don't know that that's going to be such a big deal. But, our assessor, accurate, the very first one, it's $45,000 for the year, we know it. There should be a payable for $45,000, January 1st, and we pay it $37.50 a month.
Yeah, and in the system, because in our system, we don't create liabilities that we know are out, talking in accounting sense. We don't enter in the system a liability, knowing that liability is sitting out there that we're going to fulfill throughout the year per se. When we're budgeting, we know it's there. Just like our debt expenses, we know that with our debt, we might pay, like I said, $200,000 to $250,000 by March, but we're not showing it on the balance. We're not showing it on our revenue and expenditures that we've already.
Right. Well, okay, the debt service should be a pretty easy
But just like
example.
this
There is a
assessment.
liability for the principal amount as
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
January 1
Yeah.
of this year. We know that we pay principal and interest in the spring and interest only in the fall on a fixed date. We know what it is, and we know what that dollar amount is. In our budget, we have budgeted under debt service, interest expense, we know exactly the number,
Yeah.
and principal repayment under debt service.
Yeah. and that's where I'm getting.
The interest expense isn't booked as a payable for the whole year. It technically is accrued daily. But we don't accrue anything. We don't accrue interest payable on our balance sheet or our income statement
And what,
until a check or,
The
I think
invoice.
we pay it by ACH.
until the coupon comes in.
Until the
basically.
and we pay by ACH out of our checking account. Then you book a reduction in the payable, the principal, and you book an interest expense.
And what you guys are looking for is to say, once we know there's a known expense on, a known expense, that we make a note of it somehow, so that we know, so that everybody's aware that, we may have only processed $9,500 worth of invoices for this line, but we know that there's going to be another $500 that comes in to get us to 10,000. Or like with the assessor, we don't create a payable to show that, yeah, there's still 11 more months of payments coming, and we know they're coming. That's, when we budget, that's, to me, the budget is setting what is our best estimate of what we're going to spend for the year, and should be a cutoff. And I think what we're trying to get at is, and what I'm trying to get at is that, in my mind, when people go over in line items, either they're going way over because of maybe an expense we can't plan for. Hopefully, that's the only reason you're going way over. Like I said, repair, something you couldn't plan for. But if you're going over consistently and it's small amounts incrementally, that comes down to a department head and staff not understanding the budget and not living within their means at the end of the day.
If they're holding on to, if they're,
way
Yep.
off
Yeah.
subject. here,
well,
I
we're
think,
just, we
because-
got into the accounting, I asked the question
if we're-
about the purchase order
and if
system
they're-
in workforce and,
And-
and the payables if it was part of municipal accounting.
It does look
Yeah.
like it's
So-
sort of a part of municipal accounting.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really hard to tell from.
Yeah.
And in our budget, we do have 35 for accounting and 20 for document, remember?
Yeah,
So that's the 55, so that's in our
And-
budget that we approved in 2023, and sorry, Brad, that, you know, all of this budget and how, whether this accounting program that we're gonna buy can solve, as a technology matter, solve an issue as opposed to a staff or a human issue of getting your invoices over here and putting them in, as opposed to, yeah, we don't have a purchase order system, but somebody is ordering that. A department head is ordering something, and they darn well should know, other than like a repair where they give you an estimate. Yeah, it depends when we get in there, but your paper order or whatever, well, they know what it is.
yeah,
Click.
yeah.
I know exactly what it is, and the bill is right on your screen,
Yeah.
actually.
And it's, to provide.
And it could be entered in right then.
Yeah, when we.
It
when
could
we-
be.
Right.
When we process, we shouldn't enter it into the system until we
Receive the goods.
receive the goods, and that's how we account for the goods, because, like the truck, it was a 20, you guys budgeted for it in 21.
Yep.
Or 20, might have been a 21 budget expense or 22 budget expense, but
I
we're
think we
not-
ordered it in 21 and budgeted it in 22.
And
Because we knew it wasn't gonna come in 21.
And in reality, due to the check, because we had to recut the check's not gonna go out till 23. But if we would have paid in 22, it would have been one of those things that would have been a crossover, because the budget the auditor doesn't only takes into account expenses that hit once you receive the goods. So you haven't received possession of the truck, so really it's gonna be a next year expense. And if you look at the numbers, it's gonna be off by 100, would have been off by 105,000, because the truck would have come into possession in 23, not 22 when it was there, but we know that money's there for the truck.
That should be treated as a deposit.
Yeah,
But there is no,
purchase
Hey.
order,
there is no purchase order, there is no payable. We have a 105 deposit,
yeah,
and we have a contract
contract.
but it's not a payable because goods haven't been delivered, so it's not a liability until the goods are delivered, so you're not gonna book a payable, but we still have a deposit of 105.
Yeah, so, and that's one of those, weird accounting things, and the way to look at it too is, so, even if you, and I think putting something into the software ahead of time is only gonna create confusion on behalf of the staff, and then you run into the issue to make sure you're not paying for something you haven't received yet.
Right, it should not be put in until we receive it. But maybe a quicker turn on invoices that are actually payable because the goods or services have been received would be helpful in the sense of we'd get more accurate information quicker. But that's not a software issue per se, that's a
Yeah.
department head staff issue.
Yeah, like, not to pick on the fire department, but you look at the invoice from Boundary. It's dated 12/4 by the fire chief, or dated 12/4 by the fire chief. And it is, the date of the invoice is 11/22 of 2022. And whether that's when this was, the order was played, this is a ship date, so I don't know. But they're ordering all this online. So that should be known, but an invoice from 12/4 should have been brought up here for payment at the 12/15 meeting, not sitting around, especially for an invoice dated 11/22, which would have come in. Granted, maybe it came in 11/28, but it still should have been turned around and brought up here, or it could have been scanned up here, could have been.
Right.
There's multiple ways to reduce the delay in these invoices coming up. We're not that far apart from any of our department heads where this stuff cannot be brought up in a timely fashion or provided in a timely fashion.
All right, so it looks like we've got to solve the issues that we're discussing as part of this software. We may not have a technological or software fix. Maybe it's a policy fix with regard to a policy. It's a fix with regards to getting invoices up here and getting them in the system, before the checks are cut,
Yeah.
because we owe the money. If the goods, the Boundary, they get a invoice for 52 items of medical supplies. Well, yeah, I get it. They need to check off each one of them and make sure it was received before that invoice comes over here. And if they didn't receive something, it's back ordered or whatever, that all needs to be accounted for. But once that's done and it's approved, it should be sent over here. Now, does it mean we have to, if the invoice is due in net 30, we can come over here December 5th, it's paid January 3rd. We could have it approved December 15th. So there's room for improvement in that. Sorry I brought that up, but I think that was, to me, one of the important things about whatever financial software we're going to, I'm assuming this is an upgrade from our existing system. Whenever I look at software, I look at the ease of user training, that is, they can pick it up and train, know how to use it. The other thing I look at is whether it's common. And the reason I look at whether it's common is because people come and go. And if you advertise for someone who knows the ACS system, nobody's going to workhorse? Yeah, I would think so. The number of municipalities using it. As far as the difference between the two proposals here, I'm not, because I know how data entry goes and software goes, too many bells and whistles. A couple of things typically happen. The extra bells and whistles are never used because the people can't figure out how to use them, or they're not useful to be used. Or second, their training is bogged down by learning bells and whistles instead of basic. Here's what we need to, here's 90% of the transaction. Learn that first before you go on to the bells and whistles. And if you can't learn that, you'll never get to the bells and whistles. And if you do, you're only going to impede your knowledge and training and ability to operate the 90% that you need to use. So the workhorse, I don't know that we need bells and whistles. Workhorse is cheaper, mostly because it doesn't have the extra bells and whistles. I rather doubt that we need them. I rather doubt that the people running this will be able to use those bells and whistles even if they can get through this. This is going to be a big step for them to get trained up, right, Brad? I mean, you've used this system, so you're going to be way far ahead of everyone else. I did have an issue about payroll. I know at the board level, we talked about outsourcing payroll, mostly because of the mistakes in payroll this last year, and obviously, Brad, you weren't part of it. I see a dribble over one for our and payables, Ms. Dashix. I have no idea why that is, other than it wasn't done properly. And Brad knows that my issues with payroll and the W-2s that need to be fixed up. But the mistakes made in payroll this last year in particular. As far as the budgeting goes, I am frustrated with finding out months after the end of our year how badly the budget is out of whack. This relates to the 21 budget, not the 22, the 21 budget. And the ability to get and any financial software has got to be financial software, not only for the users and being able to get people up to speed, trained, or hire people that have worked it or have experience in this software, but also our financial auditors. And I think the more common the software is, better auditor pricing and maybe quicker audit results, when we get our financial statements reviewed. They're not prepared, we prepare them, but reviewed and audited. I should say not reviewed, just audited. We get audited financials, we do not get reviewed statements. And we price that out that such that we don't have them, pay premium prices to get it right away. It's later in the year. But we've got to know as a board, earlier than that, later in the year, that these books are closed. If we have a budget problem and need to do a budget amendment, this board needs to know in January, February, not actually in December, in theory. But at least in January or latest February, as opposed to June. So that's what I'm looking for, Brad, in the.
Yeah, which to me, part, I hesitate to say this to set an expectation, but to me, there should be an ability to share monthly revenues and expenditures with the board as part of the packet. It shouldn't be difficult to share that with the board, especially with the new software. And I don't want to set the expectation this will happen overnight and give us time to do it, even through 24. But to me, the end goal of the new software and the ability of the new software and the budgeting process is that as we go through this process, the budget, when we're going through the budget, the document that you look at for the budget, or how we review the budget document, whether we decide to look at it by department, and we have revenues and expenditures by department, or we look at it by department and there's a revenue side and an expenditure side of each department on separate sheets. However we do it, Workhorse has the ability to, one, create the budget for us, or not create the budget for it, but be the budget document, which to me in all sense of the terms comes back to when you're creating the budget for the year and then you continue to see the same report out, or not the same report out, but the same format for report out of revenue expenditures, it should make it easy for board members to then understand where we are with the budget throughout the year, more so than not. And so that, to me, that's a goal that we should strive for. Is it going to happen overnight? No. Is it something that's going to happen in 23? Don't hold me to it. It's something that we worked for in the 24 budget, or is it something that we worked through in 24 to get to the 25 budget and then carry on? That might be the goal too. But to me, having a document that becomes familiar across the board for 22 to look at budget and then revenue expenditures is capable with this software, in terms of, I could produce a report, and let's say we're gonna look at we're gonna do it by department. So fire department, at the top, let's say at the top you put your revenues, at the bottom you put your expenditures. Here's what we're budgeting for the year, here's what the past years have been when we're doing the budget. But then when we go and do monthly reports, we show, here's what you were in 2022, here's what you budgeted for in 23, and here's where you're at as of month end for January in 23. That, to me, I think may help, I don't want to say may help, but create some familiarity, so you're always seeing the same you're seeing the same format of the documents, so you know where to look by line item to say, oh, fire department's this, or elections, we're with this, here's where we're at. So there's some familiarity and you can see it.
And that this software Workhorse, and I assume the other one too, Civic, can produce reports like that without a lot of staff time. That's the other thing
Yeah,
too.
I mean, you could.
It's gotta, we have to have information readily available without a lot of staff
Yeah,
time
we can-
involved.
We can, once you create, so they have, you know, boilerplate reports, revenues and expenditures, you go through all the revenues and you could have all the expenditures show you where you're at month to, year to date. You can break it down by other stuff, but you could create customized reports by, like I said, department, you could just have an expenditures for fire department, you could just have revenues for fire department, you could break it, you could have both revenues and expenditures in there. You can have all these reports at, once if you want a customized report, you know, you just have to create it, but once you create it, you're fine, but revenues and expenditures are good. You can even break it down by fund, you can break it down by, you know, you can go pull the transaction stuff. It's easy in there to go do this stuff quickly, and reliably.
Okay, what, I was gonna say, now. we gotta
Do
get-
you have
some
a,
action.
do you have a pre-written?
Well, let me ask this. I think scheduling a presentation, I don't know that that's gonna do the board any good. Nobody wants that. Do we need to go out for RFPs? Or do we have enough to make a decision on? I mean, these are the major software companies.
I think we have enough to make a decision.
I agree to go ahead and, but do we know, the any of our ordinances or say a limit that after X amount of dollars, you have to have a RFP or,
No,
I can't think of anything,
I don't
but,
know about the ordinances. We did ask the village attorney, and that's only for construction projects where you have to have, go out for bid. And,
oh,
Yeah, it was over 25,000 or expected, because we had 35 in the budget, so I
Right.
said, well, probably is gonna be, you know, potentially over 25, I think. I think this is awfully close. But it's not a public works project as defined by state statute.
okay.
So we're not,
Because I knew in the back of my mind, there was some,
right, we did ask, Brad and I did ask, because that.
Oh, okay.
The 25
right,
triggered it in my mind, and I knew we were gonna be close, if not over. So I don't think we need to do that. Brad, do you need, or does the board need any further information that we can just direct you to provide some more information and bring it back next time to get approval, or are we ready to approve? Now, you said you wanted to maybe talk to our auditor about the fixed asset program. When I looked at it, my first note when I looked at the quote, I'm like, where's the fixed assets? And of course, the next quote in the
quote.
packet was with the fixed asset piece in there. But I you know, and a company, I would say, absolutely. What are you, crazy, not having fixed asset package because of depreciation? You know, tax and bonus and all this other stuff that's available in these packages. But for municipality, I mean, we do have fixed assets on our accounting statements. I'm not sure how we're keeping track of them now.
and the auditor, it's not uncommon for the auditor to do it. You know, so that to me, like, if you guys were willing to move forward tonight, where it says if you guys would approve it with the fixed assets, and then, barring conversation with the auditor, I can always bring that back to you guys and say, at least I can get a moving on it, and whether or not we approve the one and then come back with the fixed assets, it's not a big deal, because, in reality, the fixed assets, I don't even know if we have fixed assets in ACE in our current software. So to me, the auditors probably Howard probably had a spreadsheet, did the depreciation, and then let it be, or he updated it, or asked Karen to update it, or something like that, to that degree. And really, you know, fixed assets, there's really hasn't been, you know, except for streets, there hasn't been a lot of big changes. So,
Yeah, any big piece of equipment, we know about it, there's 4 or 5 things, right? Every year, if that.
Yeah.
Or capitalized repair, I think we had one year on the fire engine. We had to capitalize a repair, an extraordinary repair. But I don't know how we keep track of them now, and of course, we have a list, we just saw the list from our insurance company proposal of all of this equipment, so I know it's being kept track of somehow or another, how accurately, I don't know, and people can then.
But that could be, that's a separate module anyhow,
Yeah.
and that could be added on.
we come back, that'd be, the goal initially be to get the other modules up and running, and then fixed assets would be one of those things you come back at in third and fourth quarter, and maybe
Yeah.
if you need to plug away at that, so in time for the audit, you have it done, or even if it drags into first quarter of '24, it could be there, because it's just a matter of, without overcomplicating, it's entering it, but then also getting the data to match what the auditor has in terms of where it's depreciated from.
Sure, that's the original balance. Yeah, it's part of the transition. How, in the transition, you think Workhorse can work with us, this ACS system that they
Yeah.
can?
Yeah, as
in
long as it can
transition?
produce.
That's the other thing I worry about, but that's any software. I mean,
And
Yeah.
we're just looking for good beginning balances for each account, or basically each line item of each physical account we
for
have.
each general ledger account.
Yeah, that we have, that will need a good beginning balance, but that, like I said, I think that's something that we can talk about at the next meeting, about whether we've talked about Howard, maybe reach out to Howard to assist with some of that.
The automatic payment system that we have to pay some of our bills, is that separate software?
That, the automatic payment of some of our bills that's just utilizing those companies, providing them the information they need to automatically withdraw, stuff.
Or automatically pay from citizens.
Yeah, which I think it's vice versa, I think that it's set up an automatic payment from.
I mean, if we switch, assuming we switch to Workhorse, that'll still work? ACH or whatever it is?
Yeah, because anything we do with ACH, Workhorse can create a file for ACHs. And when you see those ACHs on this system, or on the current system, what they're doing is they're actually fooling the system to say with an ACH payment, when it really like a credit card payment is not necessarily like an ACH payment. They're fooling it by saying it's an ACH payment, but you're not creating an actual ACH file, which is the name of the file you're using to make the payment. So you're somewhat fooling this. You're not fooling the system. You're just working around it.
Yeah, it's just a different way of making a payment. Instead of a check number, you're making a direct payment, electronic payment.
Yeah, and you'll see like with this.
Okay, I
That's
just,
all it is to me.
I
right,
forget how Workhorse is. I have to go back and look at. I could go back and look at some other communities, and I could probably tell you what it will show up as. But you'll still see it as a payment.
It's some kind of electronic payment.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're looking for, I suppose, a motion to approve the proposal from Workhorse Software Services as presented without fixed asset.
Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
second,
Okay, we've discussed it at length, but it's an important, it's just like the roads.
Well, it's-
You're out to spend $750,000 on roads, or 30,000 or 20, what is it, 23.8 plus the 34.50 annual support, and probably this payroll portal. Because as presented, it's on the page as presented. So you're spending $27,000, $28,000, so it's an important decision by the board. So we beat it up. Any further discussion? All in favor?
aye,
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Job description.
So, in front of you was an updated job, was a new job description I put together today for the position. A lot of the essential duties were pulled from the previous job description. And then, essential knowledges were stuff that was kind of added. So if you guys kind of want to nitpick through there, we can. I think the big stuff, and we can always final approve this next time too, but I think the biggest thing to probably talk about tonight, if we don't want to nitpick through the other stuff, is the required experience, education and training. There may be a little bit of the physical demands, but I think the experience, education, and training are probably the big thing there. Right now, it's 5 to 7 years, experience in public works, park maintenance, road repair, construction, maintenance or construction or related field of work. 3 years direct experience in management or supervisory role. I think are the big things, and then high school diploma or equivalent required, additional certifications, training, education considered, valid driver's license needed, and then commercial or minimum of a Class B CDL with air brake endorsements is needed to operate our vehicles.
What, can I ask a quick question on that? Why within 12 months of employment?
So if somebody doesn't have it, they would need to obtain it. 12 months is kind of a common criteria for obtaining it. I would hope
That means he would not be able to do any snow plowing for the first year.
with our trucks, or well.
And then come 12 months, if he still doesn't have it, then what?
And so what I would say is that the world we live in today, to find somebody with a CDL is much harder than what some may think. And the trend is going that applicants are not as likely to have a CDL as they maybe were 20 years ago. And that goes along with upgrades and legislation regarding CDLs. 10 years ago, you go to the DMV, you take the CDL test like you do to get your temporary driver's license, pass the test, literally in the afternoon you could go do that in the morning, literally in the afternoon you could have a test scheduled to go get your license. A private examiner provides you the test or gives you the over-the-road test. You could pass it and you could be on the road driving truck by 5 p.m. that day. They've now gone to where you still go to the DMV, get your temps, but then you also have to go take physical courses now and do driving within those courses before you can even go take your commercial driver's license on the road exam. So it is a much more difficult process to obtain a CDL now than it was even a decade ago. And they continue to make the process to obtain CDLs more difficult is not the right term, but it all goes back to safety at the end of the day, and that's why you've seen these things, and that's what's made it more difficult to obtain. I think if we had a candidate that came in that met most of what we were looking for, and they didn't have a CDL, then it would be a question whether the village wanted to do that, because there would be an expense for that person to go get a CDL. But at the same time, I think I think leaving it in there the way it is probably best bet, just so that we do get a candidate that may fit in, that doesn't do it.
But if a candidate didn't have a CDL, that means he's never driven any of this equipment. And obviously then, how could you manage people that have to drive that equipment?
So there's exceptions to the rule, or they may have broken the law.
I'm not certain that's a good thing.
There are exemptions to the rule. Driving farm machinery for the process of agricultural operations don't require a CDL. So somebody could have experience with it. I can't speak to whether somebody's been somebody could have been in the military and experienced driving heavy trucks in the military, but not have a CDL also. I think the question becomes, I don't want to necessarily say, if we have a candidate that comes in that doesn't have a CDL, it not necessarily is gonna check against them, but it just means they need to be that much stronger in all the other areas that we're looking for. And pose the ability and the willingness to go get a CDL to do it more so than not.
The only thing I'd recommend though is say CDL preferred, or, within your 12 months, type of a thing. Because that's what ideally, that's what we want.
We ideally need it, and
Yeah.
that's where, I think the way we have it now is, we're saying they have to be able to obtain one within 12 months. We could take the 12 months out and say within, or put like an agreed upon timeframe. Two would be the other the other way to word it, so that maybe it isn't 12 months, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 3 months, depending on the ability of the class and the cost, but, it's one of those things that whatever we wanna put there, I think, at least putting that, have a CDL and the ability to obtain one within a set period of time is what we need.
Well, it gives you a bigger pool to pull from,
Yeah.
the way you have it. It's just that I don't know that we would,
Like I said, to me, if somebody doesn't, I wouldn't necessarily kick out somebody who doesn't have a CDL, but, the question becomes what they would have to overcome in other areas to.
yeah. But that would be more the exception to the rule,
Yeah.
rather than,
Yeah, and this gives us that exception to that rule.
Yeah.
To it, where,
because your example of the military is correct.
Yeah.
I mean, when I retired, I was licensed for just about any vehicle that the military had. But I don't have a CDL,
so.
because I was a construction engineer for a big portion of it.
Yeah, and so I think, we're, to me, the ideal candidate is somebody who's been a foreman or in some type of supervisory role with another public works department. Maybe somebody who's been in road construction, which then potentially they've been in the operating engineers union, which they may or may not have a CDL at that point, but they've had experience working on their machinery, and they should be able to easily obtain a CDL within that time frame. So, to me, that would be the, most of our candidates, I think, are gonna have it. I'm trying to think.
But it's a tough way to start out as the boss, to have the people underneath you have skills that you don't.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, there's two parts to it. One is we need him to plow snow. He's a working DPW director. Number two, and drive trucks. And number two is, I hate to say credibility, but maybe that's the right word, with the subordinate staff.
you gotta have respect from,
Yeah, right.
from them.
Now, somebody coming out of the military is 32 and he's been driving
Right.
trucks for 10 years and running some division there.
Right.
Okay, go get your CDL, okay. But, and he would have credibility too. These stuff, you should have seen what I drove.
Yeah, this is pretty nice stuff.
So that's different, that'd be the exception, but
Right.
that'd be somebody that I would think the board would, Brad, you would consider.
Yeah, so, to me, those are the big things, that's what we're gonna put on the posting is stuff like this. I think the physical demands in there are good, I think
50 pounds enough?
I think it's usually what you see.
Yeah,
I know that I went back and looked at some of our stuff. Some of our job descriptions were really specific with charts and frequency.
Those are all compliments of the HR committee.
yeah, I had a comment about that when the first draft.
So, if we wanna get that detailed, I'm more glad to pull those charts out and put them in here and fill them in. But I think it's there, and so, like I said, a lot of this stuff is here. I think that workings, I thought there was a spot that I put in here that, kinda alluded to that this was a working position, but maybe.
Yeah, I gotta
kinda
make sure
hit-
it's working position,
it kinda
report, reportable to the administrator, you, it reports to
Yeah.
administrator clerk, is that in there?
Yeah, at the top. I mean, there's parts where it hints in here, the job description or the posting I know has a little bit more to it. You know, there's stuff I think kinda hints in here. Right in that first line, position summary, the Director of Public Works position is responsible for overseeing and assisting in the operation of the Public Works Department.
Okay, there's the reporting, right?
And then, down in essential duties, about halfway down, oversee, assist, and participate in snow and ice removal operations. And I think there's one other place where I kinda put in there that assist, you know, assist with projects, you know, it kinda hints to say, hey, this is a working position, not
Right.
an administrative.
In that same section, I was gonna bring this up first, but, the very first bullet, work with the foreman. Why are we saying he has to work with the foreman to determine anything?
We can remove it. Because well, here's what I put in there. In the conversations we had with Tyler and Bo, and the more I look at it, I think that, in my mind, the Public Works Director is somebody who is an administrative position. And if the village has gone to the lengths to create a foreman position, if the director is dictating to all the staff what they're doing each day, then why did the village create a foreman position? And
Well, I agree with that comment, but
so
that's past history.
yeah, and so to me, that's where the Public Works Director is working with the foreman to develop weekly and daily plans, and the foreman is then
Supposed to execute them.
execute them with the staff on how that's done, and
Would coordinate be a better word than work?
coordinate. But that's why I put in there, so that it's, that we're
Just
setting that.
smack me of,
You want me to bury that further down in there somewhere? So it's not like one of those first things that somebody sees. and goes,
well, that may be one of the reasons why it just jumped out at me, you know, type of thing.
Not that that was the issue that we had, but
No, because they didn't do this. It would be, in my mind, most efficient, but I just don't think we should be telling them you gotta do that. That's really what this is saying. So maybe, I don't know how you'd rephrase it, but,
we can strike it.
I mean, it's, somebody has to develop the work plan for the week. That wasn't being done either. It was more the work plan for the day. You know, because you wouldn't necessarily know how far they were gonna get that day, you know, so they didn't bother figuring out, because every morning they'd have to come in and ask John what he wanted them to do. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I like the idea of somebody developing a plan for it.
Because the way we're operating right now is, last week Tyler and I talked, okay, what's going on for the week? How are we doing it? You know, they had scheduled to take the, aerial truck up to Appleton preliminary on Wednesday. Well, they saw the weather on Thursday with the rain, or on Tuesday with the rain. Well, let's not lose productivity outside on Wednesday if it's not raining, so let's take it up today. And that, to me, is to some degree, the foreman should have, I think, some ability to do that or bring that forward on stuff like that, to look at how efficiently the department will operate, more so than the director, you know, doing that. Because if the director's spending 10 minutes a day handing out, you know, the daily plan, maybe it's a 30-minute conversation at the beginning of the week or the end of the week, say, what are we doing for that week, or the coming week, or the current week, is more my feeling on it. And, you know, is it a more efficient use of time? Maybe not in the grand scheme of everything, but it's one of those things that it
Might make for a more cohesive unit, you know, for sure.
So I can strike it if that's what you guys want. Like I said, to me, the big thing is if you guys are good with, like, the physical demands, experience, requirement, education, then I can get the advertisement posted. And then we can always approve this job description at the next meeting after everybody's kind of a chance to look at it.
Yeah, I've read through it, and I'm real familiar with the old one. You know, I'm fine with it. All of it, the way you have
Other than
it.
that first sentence.
Well, I could live with the first sentence. It just struck me right away that,
How about?
But
I
did
have some
you-
I have some comments, but how about if we could direct staff to, take comments by tomorrow, Monday, and then direct you to finalize the job description for approval for next board meeting, but go ahead and post it to get it going.
yeah, I was only gonna ask, did you talk with Chris at all about this?
Yes, I did reach out to Chris Schwartz. He did give me anybody off the top of their head. They are doing a search right now for the city of Jefferson and Jefferson County. And they had done that search, they started that search probably just after you guys finished up here. The initial search, I think their ideal candidate was an engineer. City of Jefferson has the Public Works Department, I don't know if they oversee parks too, but then they also have a sewer and water utility along with electrical utility. So they do have a little bit of that. I guess they didn't wanna pay what the finalists they had was the issue, because they were probably professional engineers and were looking for a high dollar, but I think they were advertising good money for it. But, so they dropped the engineer requirement out of it and they're re-looking right now for more applicants. And so, Chris didn't necessarily give me a name of somebody, but he's got out there, I think as we post, we'll get some interest. Like I said, we're advertising 70 to 82, which I think puts us in a really good spot to at least get some attention.
Yeah.
You know, somebody who is looking to maybe move up, I think, you know, we have the flexibility, you know, with a small organization, there's maybe a little bit more flexibility, I think, with the way we're looking to operate the position too, is that, you know, if our director's coming in to plow snow on, start early in the day, they should have the flexibility, they would, as long as they're getting the 40 hours and they're getting the work done, be flexible with their time and potentially go home early one day or things like that. So it's being flexible with their schedule, which I think is there. And things of that nature, I think we gotta offer a good competitive benefits package for somebody, so, I think we'll get some good interest on it. And so we'll get it posted, I think have it run through, not the end of the month. My hope would be is if we have a good candidate to try to get interviews done before the first board meeting in February, so that, potentially have somebody come in and meet you guys. The process that I'd be looking for, and if you guys are good with, is, we can talk about this in the next meeting, to think about it, is maybe have, I don't know how active our Public Works Committee's been, or Road Committee's been. If it hasn't been real active, then maybe I would ask one of,
Doesn't
What-
exist.
one
Right.
board member to sit in on the interview process, to look at the candidates and provide information. With that, for interviews, I would pull out who I think are finalists. I would also, if a board member sat in and shared, you know, all the candidates with the board member, and then conduct the interviews, and then bring the final finalists to the board to meet with the board, / maybe interview in closed session, and then based upon that recommendation, or based upon that meeting, then offer the position to them at that time. And then if that's what we were gonna do, if the board was good with that, then depending on what pay was, if pay is gonna be more than what we've already allocated in the resolution, the board would have to approve a higher pay rate for the candidate, for it. So, kind of, we are setting precedents and policy in that the administrator position, Mr. Clerk would have the authority to make the hire, but I think that in a department head situation, it's important that the board, see who is being hired, prior,
Before they're hired.
before the administrator may offer the job to them. And to me, that's provide, like I said, seeing that this is maybe a quick thing, it's also, maybe providing you guys, information on who our other candidates were, so you guys can see and say, hey, well, why was this candidate selected over the other ones? Along with like a complete background check, prior to them coming on board, because, the background checks flush out a fair amount, I don't wanna say flush out. We don't want,
Drug and background, right?
so I have on here that, pre-employment physical, if you guys are up for that, and, drug test would be there. To me, the pre-employment physical would be that, if somebody's injured, hopefully it would be identified in that pre-employment physical, but then I think it also, I don't wanna say wipes the village of liability, that if a doctor signs off and says this person's in good physical health, it wipes, I don't wanna say, it reduces our liability if somebody isn't fit for the position and claims it was,
Too demanding.
not too demanding, but there was something prior to.
Or claims they got hurt on the job when they had a pre-existing condition. I think that's the,
So, that would be, but to me, that would be the caveat with the offer, is that, to me, the background's done, the offer's made on the condition that they would pass a pre-employment physical and, drug screening.
where would you advertise this?
To me, it would go on the league. If the board would be okay, Public Works Association, we may have to pay for, Wisconsin Public Works Association may have to pay for that. It's probably a minimal fee of $25 to $50. But, those would be the two big ones. The league is free. I know I've brought up Indeed before. I think putting on Indeed is a good one. Those are the main ones to get out there with not a ton of cost. We start going with other areas, there is cost related to it, like government jobs, if you've ever seen that. That's about $200 to get it. When I posted for a fire chief position, I think I got 20, not even 20, when I posted for the clerk treasurer position last year in Johnson Creek, I got 12 click-throughs, I think, over a month. And I think a fire chief job, I think I got 20, which is gonna garner more national attention than not, but I think Indeed's, when I did the fire chief job, we definitely got more applications through Indeed than we did any other means. But that's a national search where, this is going to probably be more regional or something within the state than you are gonna get national, but I think, with Indeed, you're gonna weed through a lot of applications, but it's easy to weed through them and say, okay, this is a viable applicant or not.
See, you're gonna be the one weeding through them, so then I'm okay with it.
Just gonna ask, the HR committee want to get involved in any of that?
I don't see why we would need to. I mean, this might have been something that we could have passed through the HR committee, but again, they don't have any experience in what this position requires in the first place.
Right, people on the committee,
Right.
they're not in this.
They're HR, pure
Right, they're
HRs.
HR in an industry that is not
Right,
construction, not municipals, not,
right. Get her done.
well, let's make a motion to direct the staff to, I'll just say finalize, I have some comments, I'll just give them to you. Finalize the Director of Public Works job descriptions and advertise and post the position at, what is salary range of?
70 to
82?
82, depending on qualifications.
Qualifications and experience, right? Okay, do you want us to look at your posting, your ad or anything?
I can send it out to everybody tomorrow, once I get it done, but it's pretty much, we're looking for a public works director, it's a working position. This is the, these are the, qualifications, and then here's what we're paying. This is, we're part of WRS, we're part of Wisconsin, State of Wisconsin Health Plan, life insurance, may put on other benefits. Employee may participate in other employee-sponsored, employee contributed benefits, and then put, here's where you send your resume and application to, and be done with it.
Right. So I'll make that motion I just outlined. How's that?
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And you'll bring all that stuff back?
Yeah, this will go, the job description will come back, for you guys for final approval, we'll put on there, with it, and then, the posting I'll share with all you guys if,
Oh, sure, you need to post, you should share it with us, we'll send it to whoever we might know. They don't pick it off the job boards. It's all coming back through you. They're not gonna apply through us, or they should if they've tried to. I know for the administrative people tried to apply through the board, and we sent them to Chris. So if they do that to a board member, we'll just send them to Greg.
forward their application to me.
Right.
Resume.
That's the way it has to work. Okay, we good? Ready to go for the next one? This is something that we brought up with Attorney Macy when we were talking about agenda item 6C, the Public Works job description and so on, and we started looking at our ordinances, and Macy suggested to put it on the agenda, and specifically section 58-9 and 180-1. I think when we became a village, we had a working understanding that as we look at ordinances, if they otherwise need to be amended, we will update them for, first of all, town to village, for it. But in particular, when we were on the phone, we started looking at 58-9, and 58-9, it's in your package, letter A, and it talks about pursuant to section 82031B. That is a town board reference, not a village board or a municipal board. Town board only has that ordinance. I looked to see if there was something similar for villages, and I couldn't find it, but that would be a question for Attorney Macy. So there's one change. I mean, it's the village board has no authority pursuant to 82031B. So maybe that just gets struck and just say the village board may appoint a director of public works, period. But the next sentence then is, this sentence is that terms and conditions of employment shall be established in a written agreement. Now, if we want to do a written agreement, maybe that sentence can stand, but if we don't, we should strike that so we don't violate our own ordinance.
Well, I would be against having to do a written agreement.
So we'd strike it.
Yes, I would recommend that we strike it.
Dylan's nodding his head, yes, I strike it. Okay, so, the reason why it's on the agenda, you see in the attorney comments, he's looking for direction. I mean, we're not gonna let Attorney Macy draft anything unless we tell him what we want. Otherwise, we're spinning around here.
We still end up making a written
we can
offer
still
sheet. I mean,
And that's what we should.
does that qualify as a written agreement?
No, because to me, the written offer sheet, and we should do this for all our employees, no matter if it's our summer seasonal help, or if it's a fire department, part-time fire department employee, or it's a full-time employee. We should put together a sheet saying, congratulations, you've been offered X position, here's what your starting salary is gonna be, here's the benefits you're entitled to, and then it will say, you know, you're entitled to, you know, any other benefit as outlined by,
Law,
or by the personal policy manual.
Oh, the handbook.
right?
Yeah, the
Just refer to the handbook.
And then that's basically it. And then, you know, pre-employment drug screening and physical if you have, you know, any other conditions of hire, but it's not, you know, you're saying your annual starting salary or your pay is going to be this, and subject to, you know, then future raises will be at, you know, future increases will be determined by the board during, you know, regular budget stuff or, you know, it's just a starting salary. It's not a contract between you. It's just more of saying, here's what it is.
Right.
I'm accepting the job as it is.
I was just wondering if that qualifies as a written agreement. If it did, we wouldn't have to change that.
And the previous agreement, the agreement that the village board always, and the town board had with the public works director, basically was the handbook with overtime. Is basically the only, per se, benefit.
Just cause,
Yeah,
just cause termination.
Right,
We should get rid of that.
right, exactly, that's what,
If I would've known that, I would've asked for it in my contract, but.
Well, you have some severance in there.
Or on just cause. So, yeah, to me, a letter wouldn't infer a contract except for stating, here's what it is. You know, you made, vacation stuff, you know, you're kinda like stuff that's gonna be in the handbook, but it's not, maybe somebody could provide us more legal advice on that in the room, but whether that would constitute a contract, but to me, in my mind, it wouldn't.
Well, it's an offer of employment that's accepted, subject to the employee handbook, which means you're an employee at will. So, you know, contract that says you're an employee at will is not much of a contract in the sense that's the law. So, it is offer and acceptance, it is a form of contract, but it's not a, you know, means nothing really.
right.
Your starting salary. So, you know, I think that's just a holdover sentence from way back when. To me, I'd strike it just because
Yes,
it just prevents inadvertent violation by a board or a future board of an ordinance that they're charged with
yeah,
knowing. Letter B, you know, it references section 81.02, which no longer exists in Wisconsin statutes. So I'm not sure that the wording of that sentence, other than the duties as established by the village board. I mean, you look at how the village's statutes work with regard to public works, and they send you over to the city statutes, and the city statutes say that cities are supposed to have a three-member DPW board, special board. The villages act by the village board, they don't need a special committee. The village board is that committee. But I don't know, Attorney Macy can help us, if there are any duties now that they've gotten rid of section 81.02 in the state statutes to even reference it anymore. So I think that could be fixed up. The other parts of that proposed budget, I think that's expected and all of that, so I think that sentence could just be updated to village board and village administrator and chapter 180, I think it's just town to village, and then striking this negotiated by contract. Those are remnants from when we had union contracts.
right.
And there's a couple places in letter B. I'm not sure about letter C. I would ask Attorney Macy, why is the definition of roadway throughout chapter 290 in chapter 180, shouldn't that be in chapter 290? So I would delete that and have him stick it in 290 in the definitions. I see why it's in there, because the Wisconsin statutes refer to highways, our ordinances refer to roadways. And what we mean to say is highways.
Right,
That's why that's in there. I just thought it odd in chapter 180 when it's supposed to apply to chapter 290. No idea why that happened. So I think it's on the agenda, and what Attorney Macy is looking for direction, I would just I just discussed it, I would just make a motion to direct the staff to modify Village Code Section 58-9 and Chapters 180 and 290 as discussed for consideration in a future meeting, so we see it,
I'd second that.
come back. They're looking for direction. Well, Dylan stepped out of the room, is he needed a break?
Yeah.
So we should recess till he comes back. If he wants to vote. It is 9:45. Should we take it? No, we still have, well, I thought I had 2 hours on here, but obviously it took longer. A good 2 hours, how's that? We only have half the minutes, so the minutes should be good. We have my revisions to the minutes.
I got one final question before we skip before we get past this.
Oh, okay. On the ordinances?
Yeah, section that we don't have in here, but, one thing that just,
You found some more.
maybe some clarification.
So I should get up the ordinances.
I can just talk about it. And it goes back to the job description, but it intertwines.
Okay.
So, one thing I was gonna bring up is in chapter 58, I think it's section 13 or 16 or something. It brings up residency requirements, and residency requirements have been dropped in the state of Wisconsin, except for, I believe it applies to public works still, to some degree, and to, at least first responders too, and that the communities can require that anybody who needs to respond to emergencies or is on call or things that need to live within 15 miles of the municipal boundaries. Where does everybody stand on response time for a director? Do we want to have a response time or must live within a certain radius, or do we want to keep it open and see what we get and not put anything down? Based on when you guys heard me, my take would be is you guys are probably a little lax in it, where some communities are gonna be stricter. That you guys are probably just looking for somebody that can respond in adequate time that isn't going to jeopardize the safety of residents should need be. And really for us, we don't have a utility, so response time isn't necessarily over the moon. Like, we have a utility, once you start getting alarms at your lift stations and that stuff's starting to back up, well, you guys have septics, you know, it's like you having a big septic for everybody, but
No sewer, no water, it's a problem.
so, but the sewer utilities can run into the same issue, so that's where response time can become an issue, because depending on what lift station goes down and how much flows into that lift station, you can have issues much quicker at some than others. So, but based upon when you guys heard me, I'm thinking that you guys are probably more on the lax side for response times, as long as it's a reasonable rate, more so than not.
Yeah, our fire department, everybody is on a duty crew, and they come from all over southeast Wisconsin. We don't have any residency requirements. Now, our chief, he had to live within a certain number of miles or minutes.
I think it was 15 miles.
Was it 5 miles?
Yeah, it was closer. He
It was
lives,
like- yeah.
our current chief lives in the village of Waukesha, not too far from, he might live closer to the station than I live, okay?
Yeah.
The trouble with, you gotta live in the village is, if their justification is, you have to be physically present because of an emergency, DPW director would be, because you gotta judge the condition of the roads and call out
Right.
the haul crew. Okay. Somebody can live in the village of Waukesha quicker, than someone who lives across town. I mean, to me, the mileage thing makes more sense for, time.
I would tend to leave it open only because it gives us a bigger pool to
Yeah,
pull from.
that's the flip side.
You know,
We live in
it's-
southeast Wisconsin. We have 2 million people who live here, okay? And you gotta pull from a bigger pool. That's the whole point,
So,
you
okay.
know? Our old DPW lives in Muskego, so
I mean, we just
Store.
don't want
it would be difficult.
for somebody to live West Bend and make a call about what the snow's
Right.
doing. I mean,
Right.
Or even in Milwaukee, because of the lake.
yeah. I mean, we do have cameras here. You're relying on more on
The
But-
sheriff's department calling it
cameras
in.
and things like that.
Right.
But we couldn't get them both. We'll get applicants from both areas, somebody close, somebody further away. And we would give precedence to somebody who's closer perhaps.
Okay, that answers my question. So if you guys want to,
Yeah, I don't know that we need to address anything at dash 15 with regards to that.
we can come back and just do that at another time.
Right,
Blanket.
and it's, yeah.
Because a lot of that's just wrong anyways.
So, Dylan, while you stepped away, I made a motion to, my motion. Maybe you heard the motion before you stepped away. To direct the staff to modify the village code section 58-9 in chapters 180 and 290 as discussed for and bring back for consideration at a future meeting. Somebody seconded it.
I did.
Trustee Slaney seconded it. And I just read off my discussion points. There's other discussion to add to what I just read. Let's discuss it, and then we'll take a vote on the motion. Any other discussion on any of
No.
those? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Correspondence and so on. Happy New Year, Village President. I did announce, as you all know, that last Thursday I would not be filing nomination papers. Tomorrow is the last day to file nomination papers for Village President. You see the committees and so on that are open in the agenda. I'm not going to read them off. It's 10 minutes to 10, so we'll go quick. Trustee Dashik, you're up next. Next up, report. I'll go backwards. Trustee Newman.
I had a couple resident calls this week. One was on Christmas tree pickup, but I understand from our village administrator that he's trying to get that defined with waste management. The other one had to do with our fire department seems to park in our neighborhood about once a month. Nobody knows why. So they come and park their vehicles in our neighborhood,
Whose neighborhood?
our neighborhood.
Who's our, I mean,
Parkwood Trail, which is
Okay.
right behind the Blue Heron.
okay.
Have no idea if there's a call or not, but they
What's parked there?
just sit there.
What's parked there?
I didn't see the actual vehicles.
Hmm.
But a couple in the fire department.
Question for the chief, or Hayes, assistant chief.
Maybe, unless there's a call, but it seems strange, and they say it happens about once a month. So, just wanted to inform you of that. That's all I have.
Trustee Solani.
No, I have nothing to.
Okay, great. Sheriff's report. Sheriff wasn't here today, so there's no report. Administrator Clerk Calder.
I went to a meeting today on the Kenneth Mikulski Trust. It was in Muskego. Town of McGuanago was there. Muskego was there. Mr. Mikulski's estate attorney was there, along with the developer. Mr. Mikulski, some of you may know, he lived in the village of Vernon, owned several properties in Vernon and in the area, and he left an estate and wants to see these properties go towards recreation and to help veterans. So we just had an informational meeting on that today. We'll be having further discussions on this at a future meeting about it. The other thing that I have to report on are Public Works Department update. The guys have been out, we've had three events. They were out on the 23rd, once in the morning, and then I think they went back out once at night, and then they went out on the 24th to take care of drifting. Everything went good. They were out once last week to plow and salt, and then they were out again this morning to salt. Everything's been going good. They've been out doing tree removals and brush removals along ditches, and they've been assisting with some of this 2023 road improvement stuff too. So everything's been going good there, and nothing further to report.
Okay. Accounts payable.
The other thing I want to note on accounts payable is that the amount to approve is correct, but I believe that I may have clicked something wrong in some of the ACH payments or payments that are automatically made through, like online, through electronic wires and stuff like that. May have had a check print, so we may just end up voiding out some of those checks, but, so we don't get double payments.
Right, for example, one of the,
One inspector.
Capital One, yeah, there's a couple of bills there. I did ask Brad about the Karen Shu credit card. Well, two things. One is to make sure that they were taken out of their name, and I think Brad confirmed that they
Yep,
were.
yep.
And secondly, there's,
Are her cards canceled?
Yeah, so, the Costco one is canceled. All of them are, I gotta cancel the Costco one tomorrow because we called today on it, and the question came up is is the card tied in with the membership, and no, so we just need to cancel the card, which we'll do tomorrow. Both John Henneberry and Karen Shu's Spark cards, or Capital One cards, have been canceled. So all those have been canceled, and we're working to get, new credit, Capital One. Well, I'll look at who has the better rewards deal, the Costco card or the Capital One card, because there's no sense of having more than one credit card. They were both Visas, so it doesn't limit what Costco takes Visa. So if we go to Costco, it wouldn't limit which one there is, but there's no sense of having two credit cards if you don't need it.
and,
There are rewards on those cards.
Yeah.
On those cards, what's happening with the rewards, and has anybody ever
There-
used any of the rewards?
I don't think Mr. Henneberry had, and they went away with the cancellation. Same with Mrs. Shu's, with Karen Shu's card. There was last time rewards were used on Karen Shu's card was back in July, and it was about $400 or $500, and they were used to pay down the July statement.
right, I noticed,
So it was a statement credit.
It was a statement redeemed in several ways: cash, pay down the balance on the statement, or redeem it through gift cards or stuff like that. So, and like I
I
said,
did see that, Bill.
we'll look at
You saw it too.
we'll look at I'll look at the Costco card and I'll look at the Spark card, which is the Capital One, and see which one has the better rewards, and we will choose whichever card has the better, at least initially, the better rewards to get that stuff taken care of. And
Now, these two cards, one had a rewards balance of 38, Karen, because we used it all up. I remember that invoice where it was just applied to the balance due. I think you could probably look that one up. This
it was like
summer.
July, yeah.
Yeah. And the other, John Henneberry, had $153.98 rewards balance. I don't know if those, you said those go away, but can't you use them before you?
Once we canceled, they went away. We didn't learn that until after, but
I would think that they would have told you that.
yeah, they took, yeah. But, so, we did leave those on the table, but they are canceled, so that is.
And there was some
Late fees.
late fees and interest charged.
Which,
This should have been all paid on ACH. This is one of those.
which they normally are, and that one that was my error, because it was due on the 28th, and my first day in the office was the 28th, and so, of November, and that's when it was due, so we did pay it on the 29th, so there was only 1 day of interest, and there was a late fee. But that was on my area, just not knowing that it was, due on that.
And your office staff was no help.
They knew it, they to some degree knew it, but weren't quite aware of it. Because they didn't get the emails on it. The emails came to the clerk email.
Oh, the reminder email.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we had one also, security system monitor.
The bill was for electronic monitoring. It's,
Is that something new, or is that something we
we've
had?
always paid it.
It's just a different, when I saw the company, I'm
It's-
like,
It goes
this
to,
goes to approved vendor list. Hey, what's this company?
Right.
No?
and they must go by the same name because it goes to the same PO box as Bonded Alarms out of, Hales Corners, or I think it's Hales Corners, West Dallas.
Well, just so we pay the proper party,
Yeah,
because
we
the
did.
invoice, the check was in a different name than the
Yeah,
invoice.
because electronic monitoring services, we don't even have in our approved vendor list. It's Bonded Security,
Oh,
or
okay.
Bonded Alarm Systems or something.
Okay. I think those were my questions, and Lorraine's got her FICA tax that should have been corrected, and I think mine was, personally. I don't know about Jim and Dan, Dylan.
Taxes were corrected, but the wages has to be adjusted yet.
That's what I ended up too. Jim, I assumed the same. And Dylan, did you get your FICA taxes corrected?
I haven't looked at it yet.
All right, and Lorraine did not. So that's why, Lorraine, you're on for, I assume that number $13 is the right number. But your gross pay needs to be corrected too then. Not just the FICA taxes. So box 1 on your W-2 needs to be correct before you're issued a W-2. Okay, those were my,
I have a couple.
okay?
Rosman's, there's only one receipt for 4 charges. And it seems like it's all under the fire department, so. It just seemed like there were a lot of receipts missing there.
Oh, yeah, Boundtree, I didn't have page 2, I thought, of one of the invoices, and Boundtree. Rosman's, I didn't see, I thought I,
And then Spectrum, one of the bills, we're paying the balance, but yet there was an overdue balance, or a past, and I'm just, wanna make sure we're not doubling up like we've been doing all year long.
yeah, that should be on ACH too.
It is on ACH, and he paid it, but he paid $40 instead of the $20.38, which is the monthly charge. Cause there was a previous
Oh, I
balance.
see what you're saying.
So I
Yeah,
don't
the
know
current
if that was
charge is
paid.
2038, and total due was 4076, which is 2 months worth.
Correct. So was that 20 paid or not paid from last month?
I have to go back
But
and.
everybody else, I mean, all the other ones, you were paying the current charges.
Well, if we double paid that to make sure we get a credit, that's, you're not gonna reverse
It'll
it.
show up.
Yeah, it's not like we're gonna lose the money like these rewards
There's
points.
some other stuff on here, like, that I just noticed, like the $120 for service at fire station too. That nobody's at.
Yeah, that's gotta be,
And not to distract, but we could have a company come in and audit this stuff for us, even We Energies, to make sure we're paying in the right category. We would have to split any savings with them 50% for 5 years. But they do it for free.
and if they don't find anything, we pay them nothing.
But that's like your We Energies bill to make sure you're getting billed at the right, for the right type of service.
So the,
which-
yeah. So on Fire Station 2, it's why are we paying for service what's, what is going on at Fire Station 2 that this service is needed. Right? That's a fire department.
Spectrum or what?
Yeah.
Right.
Why does it cost so much for service there?
Well, I want to know who's working at Fire Station number 2.
For internet, $120 for internet.
Yeah, for internet, that's ridiculous.
Actually, no one's working there.
It's not being used.
Oh, we just saved ourselves $2,500 in the budget. Up to.
We need to save as much as we can.
It's even more than that. $189 bills for Station 2 for enterprise services.
I see what you mean about Rosman's. I just see one in there, but I thought I saw.
Yeah, there's only the $7 receipt.
Yeah, there's an invoice with several listed on, Okay. I picked up my payables early and I got a printout and I see other ones in there. So I don't know what happened to the
Might
packet.
not have scanned, might have scanned one-sided.
I see him. I see him in my hard copy, the Rosman's one. But I didn't see a page 2 of the Boundtree
Are they,
Medical.
are they legit
Yeah.
receipts?
Yeah. Fasteners and stuff, yeah. To the extent. They ended up here, and used here, yes. All right, so. Okay, so Brad, some of these may not be checks, it may be ACH,
Yeah,
but if we approve the payables,
I'll go back through and make sure.
but maybe
that-
I don't sign checks until tomorrow or something.
I'll go back through and verify what one was ACH and which ones were.
Right, to prevent double payments. And then you'll follow up on these spectrums and,
Yeah, if we approve them, but I'll follow up with fire department, tell them we need to.
yeah, we gotta start cutting where we can. If they say they're being used, how so? Who's over there?
Why do we have almost $300 a month on
Yeah.
services for that building?
Right,
We don't pay that much for all our other stuff, why are we,
right.
nobody's there.
Okay, Sue, you're looking for a motion to approve account payables in the amount, or batch number, we usually have a batch number up in here. We don't have a
All,
Well, we could say yeah, in do we have a date on this? January 5th,
yeah,
which is all the batch number was. It's date backwards or something.
yeah.
Approve account payables, the January 5, 2023 accounts payables in the amount of 24,663.99.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Now that's,
Opposed?
motion is
Nay.
subject. Subject to whatever changes
Right.
Brad has, and then we'll come in tomorrow, late morning or something to sign them.
Okay, we'll call tomorrow morning, but
I'll
after
send-
that.
I'll send, yeah, so maybe.
Send us a text
afternoon-
message.
Afternoon,
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Manual checks, there's none. Minutes, I was happy with November 10th, so I'll make a motion to approve the November 10, 2022 Village of Vernon Joint Finance Committee meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
If you weren't there, you can abstain. Okay. I can't keep track of all the, there's more. So just abstain if you weren't there, so. So that one's passed. And then I had some minor comments. I gave them to Brad. I don't know.
Yeah.
We want to get them approved. Let me, I can pass them around. This is on November 15th. The only thing is I changed trustees Dashik's motion. It didn't have the word motion in there or moved in, so I changed it to trustee Dashik move to direct staff to schedule the 2023 budget hearing. You want to see it? And then on the 17th, I'm hoping to get all these, I'll just pass these around, just, you know, type almost changes, no big deal, I hope. Up at December 1st, there's the typo. Another typo. It's just typos on this one. Didn't even have to add to a motion. So if you got the November 15th. Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve November 15th as 2022 Village Board minutes as revised.
Second.
Lorraine's got a second.
Oh, she did?
Yep,
Okay.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. You got November 17th? Okay, get easier. While you're looking at November 17th, I'll make a motion to approve November 17th, 2022 Village Board minutes as revised.
Second.
Good? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Got December 1?
I do now.
Okay. While you're reading those, I'll make a motion to approve December 1, 2022 Village Board meeting minutes as revised.
Second.
Good? All in favor?
Aye.
Dan missed the meeting, so he'll abstain. Okay, and then I didn't, we're, have on the agenda the rest of December, but we don't have the minutes yet. So we'll table those or postpone them until next meeting. I don't think we need a motion, we'll just take no action on them. And I'll read you January 11th, which is next week, Wednesday. It's on the meeting dates twice, actually. It's the same meeting, 7 PM. It's a joint Village Board and Plan Commission public hearing. I think all that's on there is our public hearing for our zoning code amendments.
Yeah.
And Brad's published, yeah, published in the
paper.
in the paper, posted. Public can look at them on the website? The red line?
The red line's not up, the old red line version's up there, but if somebody wants them, they can email.
Okay. So they are available to look, and you'll have, well, yeah, you have a PDF. I have a PDF.
I can, yeah, I had
Yeah.
3 or 4 people request them, so I sent them out right away.
Yep. So they're available electronically. It's probably the easiest way. It's a red line version showing strike-throughs and additions. Easiest way for residents and board members and others to review. So that's next week, Wednesday, January 19th, regular board meeting, 7 o'clock, and then we're in the February 2nd, regular board meeting at 7.
What's the status or the timing for the review of court documents?
Oh, I should have put that in my report. I rushed through my report. The status of that is the attorneys from each side are going to be submitting position papers to our attorney, and based on what they're submitting, they're gonna set a schedule and probably another public, or a closed session. So I would not start reviewing anything until February at the earliest.
Don't have anything to review.
There's
They haven't sent us anything
They
yet.
haven't sent us anything, and nor will they. before February, is what I suspect.
So you think we'll get something
Early in February.
early February? Okay.
Right.
And then the hearing could be?
We'll have to give everybody opportunity to review everything they need to review, and then probably in March.
Okay. Thank you, that's all I needed at this point.
Okay. I should have announced that. I didn't know how much everybody.
Somewhere on our website, I saw that Karen Shu is still listed as our Vernon election clerk. That should be removed.
We can go through there and scrub the website. Update, at least get, scrub what we can, and all the obvious spots, and update the other stuff.
Right.
There's other stuff that's got,
Position, yeah,
other,
DPW and, yeah,
other staff and changes that need to be updated.
right, other staffing, right, there's other staffs probably listed in there too. Okay,
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. 10:15, 14.